Welcome, everyone. We are live, the 2021 Latinx Comic Arts Festival. The Latinx Comic Arts Festival is the California Central Valley's international celebration of arts creators, and I forgot to mute myself, so let me just do that. The one thing I told everyone else to do. So once again, the Latinx Comic Arts Festival is the California Central Valley's international celebration of Latinx comic arts creators. We highlight Latinx cartoonists, writers, animators, artists, and comic arts educators. And I'm so happy to be here with you. We had a live festival planned, in-person festival planned last year, and of course, we got shut down the week before, and that was very sad. But we have an amazing amount of programming this year, starting with our first panel, and we're going to jump right in to Mesoamerican comics. Interlinking Mesoamerican comics traditions of the pre-Columbian past with modern comics, this panel demonstrates the ancient traditions of comics in America and offers examples of the incorporation of themes, ideas, and comic conventions. The panel includes a heavy emphasis on how research influences panelists' work. Our panelists include Dustin Garcia, who will moderate, Daniel Parada, Louise Fogerty, and Darren Antonio Smith. I'm Dr. Theresa Rojas, professor of English and professor of ethnic studies, and I'm also the founder and the director of the Latinx Comic Arts Festival. And for those of you joining us on the live stream on YouTube, you can enter your comments. We will be monitoring that chat and we will be pulling questions from that. And I can ask my panelists to go ahead and reveal yourselves in dramatic fashion. And I want to let folks know that we are having a bit of a sound issue with our moderator. He has just left and rebooted, so he'll be back hopefully with his sound intact. But we're going to go ahead and move forward and get started. Welcome, Darren. Welcome, Louise. Welcome, Daniel. And if you wouldn't mind introducing yourselves, maybe we can go ahead and start with Darren. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, sure, great. Hi, my name's Darren Antonio Smith. I'm a comics artist and creator based in San Antonio, Texas. And I'm thrilled to be here, thrilled to talk about my work and collaborate with these really talented other artists and talk about Mesoamerican comics and their relevance in, today.
Thank you so much. How about Daniel?
Hi, my name is Daniel Parada. I'm a comic book artist and illustrator. I do primarily historical illustrations, particularly focusing on Mesoamerica. And that goes as well for my comics. I made my first comic in 2011, which was Sot, alternate history set in Mesoamerica in the 16th century. And I'm still working on that, and right now I'm working on a new comic, which is a Mesoamerican sci-fi I'll be revealing more about later down the future.
Thank you so much for that, Daniel. Louise.
Hi, I'm Louise Fogerty, and so I'm based in the UK, and I'm an artist and animator, and I make comics on Mesoamerica, on Aztec deities. That's how I sort of started, and I've made an animation on The Legend of the Fifth Sun. That was actually my graduation film from university, called Leyenda del Quinto Sol. And right now I'm making this basically an urban fantasy set in modern day Mexico called Rey Sol Tonatiuh, and it features the Nawa sun god as well as some other gods. And basically he's been sort of kicked off his throne. There's a lot of problems there in the sort of aftermath since this is set today. So he ends up hiding as a human, and he teams up with this human girl who actually has some powers, because she's a Nawali and she can transform into an animal. So they end up teaming up to try to effectively save the world and stop his era.
I love it. I love it. And welcome, Dustin is back. Show us how you sound. Yay! And
The
there's
sound worked.
All right.
Oh, we're saved.
I can get out of here. So, Dustin, we had everyone do a short intro. I'm going to hand the reins over to you.
Great.
And I'm looking forward to this panel so very much. Thank you all.
Awesome. Well, as they say, I'm fashionably late to the party, so I apologize for having technical difficulties, but welcome everybody to the Mesoamerican Comics panel. I'm Dusty. I wanted to just kind of come in here and just give us a good chance to talk about something that's really interesting as far as comic books go. I just, real quick, as we were talking about introductions, I'll just give myself a brief introduction, why this panel is happening and what we're going to be talking about. I was introduced to Mesoamerican history from one of the artists in here today, Daniel Parada, and we met through a festival. And we basically started discussing history together, and I wasn't very aware about Mesoamerican history until I actually started conversating about it with Daniel. And as time went on, as I became more intrigued with it, I became more fascinated at the idea that Mesoamerica has also had a huge historical relationships directly in creating what we would call today a modern day comic book. And we all here today wanted to kind of just discuss for those who are viewing tonight or today, wherever time zone you're in, what that looks like and how that has inspired a lot of contemporary artists today. As we were going through introductions, who was next after you, Louise?
You.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. So we got everyone introduced. So with that said, I wanted to get started in kind of going over the history of the Mesoamerican comics. So we have like a small little presentation to show you viewers today of what that looks like. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with that. So what are we looking at here? Does everyone see the screen?
Yeah, there we are.
Fantastic. Fantastic. So let's get an idea of what we're looking at here. So Daniel, you sent me this image a couple years ago when we were discussing the historical possibilities that, well, probably for the most part, this is definitely factual just based on what the kind of information you were exchanging with me at this time about Mesoamerica and the kind of the arts and what the roles kind of play. But what are we looking at here?
So this is actually a rollout of a vase painting because we don't have any books that survive from this, from the late classic, so around the years 600 to 900.
Mm-hmm.
This would actually be basically viewed as like a rollout vase, so you would have to turn it to kind of see the next scene.
Right.
So right here we have a figure on the left who's pointing down to the floor, probably to maybe a book or an open page, which we don't see because it's flat. And you can see kind of a squiggly line coming out of his mouth, and it's connecting to a pair of lips. And you can see like what he's saying to these two figures. So this is essentially something like a speech bubble. And we see the same repeated, but this time with numbers or with numerals on the right side. And we see like he's with two possible students or two pupils.
Yeah, it's effectively a comic.
Yeah.
It's like speech bubbles.
Yeah, it's interesting because speech bubbles are something that most people historically, in case anyone doesn't know, I studied comic books as an MFA student, so I got a really huge glimpse of like the history of a contemporary, what we call modern day comic books, and much of the speech bubble is something that wasn't really you see until like around the 19th century. But can you guys tell us like around what time period was this being created right here?
Oh, well, this is from the late classic, so 600 to 900.
to AD, correct?
It's old.
Yes, so this is over 1,000 years old.
So this is, yeah, this is 1,000 years old, which is kind of shocking when you think about it. When we think about a contemporary comic book or a modern comic book in that sense, speech bubbles and the kind of way things look, it's mostly seen as being like a modern print invention, you know, something that the printing press did in early 20th century. But this is done, like with what kind of materials was this stuff done with?
Well, this is a polychrome vase. They would have had their own inks.
Right.
Blacks and reds were kind of popular inks to use.
Yeah, and for brushes, they would use turkey feathers, or they had like rabbit hair. And yeah, they'd use a sort of shell, so they'd cut it in half, and then you have all the sort of components, or like the little compartments in, so you can put different colored inks.
You could actually see the brush on the right side. He has it in his hand. He's pointing it down towards the book.
On the right hand side, correct?
Yeah, on the right side figure pointing downwards, the one speaking.
Correct me if I'm wrong as well, but the elder on the left is the same one that's on the same person that's on the right hand side. So it's a sequence of events showing. So, which is an example of sequential art, which is another hallmark of you know, comic art.
So
yeah, quite often you'd find a vase, and you can like turn it round, and you'll have like a different scenes playing out as you turn it. So this is something that you don't often think about, like having been made so long ago, but making comics is very, very human, and it has a really deep roots in even Mesoamerican art.
I would argue that it's probably the oldest art form there is, in many ways. And this is kind of another way to kind of reinforce that idea. Even if you look at the line weights, as someone who, as individuals who do comic book illustration and, you know, understand the technicality of it, you can see that there's also different types of line weight within the characters themselves. Much like in comic books where we use line weight to emphasize shapes or you know, how close something is in perspective, or in the terms of like black and white to kind of pop certain things off compositionally, you know, so that certain things stand out in the illustration. But with that said, let's take a look at the next slide here. So can you elaborate on what, it seems like we have a translation right here. So can we elaborate?
Yeah, this is just translating the glyphs that he's talking about. So he's mentioning one yellow and one green. So this is just a translation.
Excellent. And we mentioned what he's communicating towards the individuals here, right? So these are kind of like, from what I remember, scribes talking to somebody who's the main kind of leader of the scribes. And they're doing some kind of correction for something they made a mistake on the illustrations and all of that, correct?
That was one of the interpretations that I read about.
So it's an interpretation. Interesting, right?
But it does look like he's a teacher.
Right. So
like,
yeah, it's interesting because based on his hat, it looks like, yeah, they have different hierarchical roles within this kind of community right here.
Well, it's not unlike today.
Right. Cool. So what are we looking at right here? This looks really neat.
So this is two figures kind of like breathing out this kind of like fiery speech. I believe in comics this has a specific term when you use speech bubbles.
Emanada is what it's called, right? So for our folks out there, emanada, basically, if you see a great example is if you've ever seen any standard like comic book, or like, for instance, like Spider-Man, when he has his spidey sense, you see the crazy lines coming out of his head. That's a terminology we use called emanada to describe some kind of abstract expression that can't be used into words. So essentially like an emotional symbol or a type of expressionistic like reaction, what have you, illustrated through some kind of symbology. And so it looks like, from what I'm seeing here, it looks like there's fire coming out of these dudes, right?
Yeah, it's like a, yeah.
So what would the fire be? Is there any speculation on what that might have been as far as like in what would be used like an emanada?
Well, it could be that they're like angry, or it's they
Mm.
certainly don't look like they're happy.
Right.
Yeah, because fire is quite often a very warlike sort of symbol.
Mhm.
So yeah,
Really
it's
interesting.
so interesting seeing this.
And these are deities, correct? So and
I'm not sure about that.
Mhm. Right.
They could be what they call wahi.
Wahi. Okay.
I think. I'm not quite sure.
No problem. Well, that's what happens when there's been a lot lost in history. We can sometimes only speculate, you know.
Well, I've
So
not actually read about like specifically those figures. So
I
I
see.
don't want to make a definitive statement.
No problem. So what are we looking at in this slide right here? This is interesting because this is in color.
Yeah, this is you can see like a ball game happening. You see a big ball in the middle, and it looks like a staircase, and you have some ball players. You see one who's kind of like on the floor, and then you have you see all around them these like lines, squiggly lines everywhere. And this is, you know, a way of showing motion. So
Right.
a lot like how we use motion lines in our comics to show things happening in action.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Interesting.
So there was like a visual language already kind of being developed around this time that would, like much like an emanada, kind of expresses like something that's abstract, like motion, something that we can see, but you can't really draw in a sense. When you see something, your hand moves and stuff, it's something you can only kind of interpret through drawing. But what's interesting is, like, again, most of this stuff is said to be, you know, innovated either, you know, in the early 20th century or late 19th century. And this is going on again in early AD, 600 AD-ish, right? And very fascinating stuff. And how, so like
it's so similar as well. Like you see this sort of stuff being reinvented today. And but when you look at that, the squiggly lines are sort of almost universally, they're kind of bouncing around and moving around, and we do this today. Same on the previous one, the fire. I mean, most likely we're talking about a very heated sort of argument going on, or something. Like there are some very universal almost symbols coming out of this.
It seems like there's an almost instinctual visual vocabulary that's used to illustrate storytelling in forms of sequential art, like comics, you know, and this is a tradition that, you know, like we've mentioned before, is something that is as ancient as humans are, you know.
But I think it's also worth noting that you have to be careful when you're interpreting these, because we're looking at this from our perspective and what these things mean to us.
Right.
But that's not necessarily what it means to them, because they're going to have different sort of symbolism. So that's also a problem when you're interpreting any kind of image, really, because you are looking at it through your own lens.
Correct.
And through your own perspective.
I actually forgot to mention on the previous slide you showed us of those two jaguar figures, that little within their speech, that little symbol of the cross with the square in it is often used. It's used a lot in Olmec culture and to describe royalty.
Yeah, that's a symbol you often see people wearing, like pectorals on their necklaces, and
a lot of
Olmec
ball
culture.
players as well, and things like that. And from what I've understood from research, is it has a lot to do with the four directions and sort of like a cosmic like connection.
Right.
But why it would be included in something they're saying, maybe it's, I know the Nahuas have this other symbol that's kind of stands for like holy speech, and it's a little it's like a wind.
The speech scroll kind of thing. Yeah.
So it could be something
often with
similar,
singing.
but like you said, it's hard to interpret without context.
Yeah, I
Correct.
mean, these are all kind of us guessing,
Exactly.
but educated guesses, but still.
Precisely. We had a quick question from the audience. They would like to know where some of these images originate from, actually.
These are all Maya vases,
So
so
they're
from the
from
Maya area.
the Maya,
Some of
okay.
these might have been looted, so I don't
Mhm.
know exactly where they came from.
It's a shame when
Right.
things are looted.
Unfortunately, a lot of
You lose so much
a lot are
context.
looted.
Absolutely. Well, we're here to hopefully get out the pieces. So we have these as
Modern
examples to kind of show contemporary examples of what we were just talking about, basically. As you were saying, Daniel, much of the motion lines used in this image are in some ways, speculatively speaking, of course, are kind of similar to what we see in contemporary comic book language. Motion lines from like trailing the object as showing impact and then location of where the object goes based on that impact. We see kind of the speed lines inspired by manga, using speed lines to kind of illustrate fast-paced action. And even the motion lines of showing a trail, of showing like the sequence of where an object flies in a span of time. And then the spinning motion, which is something I would say is pretty close to what's going on.
Yeah,
right here.
looks like
that's why I
it.
included that one.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So again, it seems to be an extensive vocabulary that's possibly gone really far back.
Yeah.
We're just kind of repeating the same traditions. So this one's really gorgeous. Can you tell us a little bit about this one right here?
So in this one, it's you see kind of a character who it's hard to see, but he's in the bottom row. He's one of the standing figures. You can see in his gut, he's kind of got this gassiness kind of thing coming out.
That one, yeah.
You can see it. I actually highlighted it in the next
Right
slide.
here, yes. I see that.
Yeah.
And this is kind of like similar to how people depict things that like are very foul or they have a strong odor.
Right.
We use that in comics, like kind of showing these kind of gassy lines as well.
I think there's a modern example.
Yeah, I put an
included.
example.
Oh, Dragon Ball.
Dragon
Like
Ball,
that.
Yes, this was Bacterium, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so for those who don't know, this was a great scene in Dragon Ball where they had a tournament fight. Bacterium is this really stinky character. And he basically, it looks like Akira Toriyama used the same kind of insinuations of stench as being kind of these squiggly lines with like weird hatching and everything. Very interesting comparison. And yeah, wow, that's wild. So what's this right here?
So this is a scene of a figure. He's shooting from a blowpipe, and he's shooting a ball at this bird. And what's interesting too is we also have two other things happening. At the top, there's a bird who's flying, and then at the bottom, there's another bird who's looking for food. And you can see in the next one, you can see the bird's wings are kind of in motion. It's opening, and in the previous one, it was closed. And you can even see the ball flying in the first one. It's near the blowpipe, and in the second one, it's hitting the bird. And on the bottom, you see the bird catching the fish. So you see here a sequence of events. If anything, this is the most clear thing that we have to
and it kind of is akin to what reminds me of it reminds me of like early animation types of technologies like zeliotropes and stuff like that, where they would have like multiple images in sequence and it would spin this rack, and then when you look through the peephole of the actual like little thing, you would actually see something move, and sometimes it was just literally two images, so you would see just like a quick movement occur. And and what were you saying? This was also on a vase, you said?
Also, these are all on vases. Yeah.
What's so again, you can turn it.
Is what you mentioned about that is I watched a lecture. I think it was from Mary Ellen Miller, who studies the Bonampak paintings, and she mentioned how the Spaniards they complained that the Maya were very wasteful with their paper.
Oh yeah.
Which kind of gave me an idea. Like, were they doing something like animation or something like flip books?
I mean, they might have found that they were wasting paper drawing all these kind of sequential images potentially when they're like, oh, you could have just conveyed this in one.
Interesting.
when they were doing stuff like this. So you can speculate that perhaps that was going on,
It's
but
just a shame we don't
unfortunately
have
we've lost
many
it.
things from
So
yeah.
we could
that survived.
possibly say that Mesoamerica was the first anime.
We don't know, but I would say it's possible.
Possible, and I'm gonna put that in all
Who
caps
knows
for
what they
everyone
burned?
watching.
Have like whole storyboards.
Right. If anything, storyboards would probably be much more appropriate. So this one's really cool too. Unfortunately, we had an animated GIF for this, but it's not going to be able to work on the PDF reader. But this is something you could see in sequence and movement, essentially.
Yeah, well, I had
Boxes.
I kind of experimented because I had done some previous illustrations with Maya boxers. This is
Right.
what's being shown here. They
Mhm.
have conch shells as like kind of knuckle dusters.
Nasty.
Very dirty. And then
Oh yeah.
You can see kind of a movement in
I want
the
to
arm. So I combined all three just to see, and it does actually make a movement of like the arm going down and the leg shifting slightly.
Right.
So
Well-
I don't know if this is the same figure exactly, but or if it's like
Yeah,
just supposed to show a general motion with different figures.
they look like different figures because if you look at what they're wearing, but I do think that their motions, because they're all drawn in different poses,
Mhm.
they're definitely trying to show the sort of range in motion that the boxers would be making.
Yeah.
Right. Perhaps their martial artist stats, like stance and all of that type of stuff too. Interesting. Interesting.
Mhm.
And there's this example right
That's
here.
the
Which
fail.
was really huge too. This one's pretty wild. Is that a gopher on the left there?
No, that's a rabbit.
Wow.
He's stolen kind of the hat of this deity who's called God El.
Mhm.
He's a very important deity that appears in the classic Maya period, and you see later versions of him in the post-classic period. And
Wow.
this hat was a kind of a symbol of his power, and
Mhm.
along with his other kind of jewels. So this
Right.
rabbit has essentially taken his essence of power.
Mhm.
And then in the next image, oh, and by the way, you can see speech scrolls, and you can see like lines of the glyphs. Unfortunately, I don't have the text of the glyphs translated here.
Yes, but if our audience can look closely at the mouths of these characters on the left and on the right, you can see quite a bit of these interesting squiggle designs right here.
Which are connecting to the text.
Yes.
Mhm.
So for those audience who don't know too, from what you've told me, that all of these types of symbols right here all have a type of written language context to them, as all Mesoamerica used these type of glyphs for. And you've made the comparison that these would be kind of like what we would consider emojis today, something like emojis.
Well, I don't know. I don't remember when I said that, but no, this glyph is specific to the Maya.
Right.
It's not like a glyph that was widespread.
Yeah.
Although they did take some of these glyphs to other places that we went. Like you have some examples.
Right. So when I say emojis, I don't mean literally emojis in the same context that we use today, but like how there's kind of like from what I've learned from you guys in Mesoamerican history, and especially with their written language, much of these symbols, what we consider like just like graphics and stuff, were used in sequence of telling some type of language or in some cases what we call numerical values and all that type of stuff. So it is a written glyphic.
Well, this is, it's basically a logo syllabic script. So you have logograms, and then you have the syllabic glyphs.
Right.
And they combine these two in the writing.
Interestingly, they used the same word for scribe as they did for artist.
Interesting. So they were like the word used for the artist was essentially the same as for writing and creating art itself. As one as opposed to being separated.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for painting and writing.
Because today we sort of separate them, but back then there wasn't any separation.
Telling a story meant drawing as well as writing.
Right, they're as one in some sense, and how kind of in today's modern forms of comic book storytelling, they're seen as a separate job, which is really interesting. It makes you wonder. So Now that we've kind of taken a look at kind of how classical, like old historical illustrations were, and kind of like how Mesoamerican comics were created at least 1,000 years ago, in some sense. From what I've been shared with you, from what you've been shared with me in the past too, is that there's tons of artists out there, not just you three, but tons of artists out there that are kind of carrying on this tradition. So let's take a look at some of those right now.
Oh yeah, this is
Pardon me?
oh, what the heck? Yeah, this is by someone who, well, she goes by Yuremek, but her name is Marisol.
Yeah.
And she created these comic strips of the gods Nemontemi.
Yeah, she's a Mexican-based
Time.
creator who did this web.
Very cool.
It's pretty cool.
Very funny. This one is
it's another Mexican-based creator. Goes by D's Draws.
Wow.
This is a comic.
Again, she makes lots of comics on the Aztec gods.
Very cool. Okay.
Oh, we can maybe provide a list of the names.
Yes.
Later, I think,
yes.
so that people can actually like properly check them out, because we're just going through examples of their work right now. But
yeah, this is
this
is Emmanuel Valtierra. I think he's based in Texas.
He's based in San Antonio.
Yeah, and he does comics kind of inspired by the codices, specifically the Mixteca, Puebla, and Aztec codices.
He actually made his own codex.
Yeah.
Named after, it's called the Codex, I think it's called the Codex Valtierra after his own name.
Yeah.
But it's an alternate history of if the Spanish had been driven out of Mexico during the war, which I know, Daniel, you have a similar project. But it's really cool. I got to thumb through it at a con, and it was really cool. They meet like other cultures and things like that.
Very cool.
I was impressed.
Oh, zoom out on that one. Yeah, this one, she's Danish actually, and she has literally just come out with this book. So right now it's only available in Danish, but she's getting an English translation, and I think she may be getting a Spanish translation, but yeah, for now, like, so this is based on like rain gods and all of that.
That's interesting to think that internationally that there's Mesoamerican comics, not just domestic to the Americas, but also across the world. You know, that's something that I don't think most people would expect. At least I wouldn't.
Zoom it.
There you go.
This is from a Japanese comic artist named Nosuku.
Wow.
She does primarily the two comics of the Aztecs. This one is, I think, the Tlatoani and Awisot, and it was essentially the Tlatoani, who's the one with the crown, the ruler, and then the Awisot. And these were kind of like comedic strips that she would do.
Very cool.
Highly recommend.
I just want to let everybody know who's watching, we will be sending a list of all these artists as soon as we're done here. There's no way we would show these super talented individuals and not make sure that you can get a link to their work. We all want to here to support the Mesoamerican community of comic book creators. So let's go ahead and go to the next image.
Wow. It's from the same artist, but this one is like more of a historical one.
Very cool. And it's interesting to see how there's kind of this intersectionality of not also contemporary comics, but Japanese manga and a lot of these creators, and utilizing a lot of the Mesoamerican, aesthetics and designs within that. That's really how this trifecta of different influences are kind of intersecting in these arts. This is crazy right here. Wow.
This is from Camilo, who also goes by Shigu. This is his comic Codex Black.
He has quite a few chapters right now.
Yeah, it's a web comic, and Yeah, it's pretty good. I highly recommend this.
Yeah, it's a great story.
Awesome. Here it looks like we have some. This reminds me of European style illustrations.
This is Jose Luis Pescador. He did. I don't know if he did the other two books, but it's supposed to be a 3-part series on the fall of Tenochtitlan.
Mm-hmm.
This is part of his first book.
Very cool. That's a cool cover too.
Yeah.
Oh, this is adorable.
I am. I got.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, this is by Ru, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He so this is something that's quite fun because he makes this I think it's a cafe Makawat, right. And so the characters are kind of inspired also, like a cross between, I think there's some Pokemon going on and some Legend of I think some Mario stuff, but he like combines it with Mesoamerican aesthetic. It's really unique.
It's very cool because I was just going to say this reminds me of like classic like 90s like cover box.
Yeah.
I was like, if I would have saw this on the shelf in Blockbuster as a kid, this would probably be my favorite game. I mean, you got so much cool stuff going on here, and this is amazing. Wow.
It's really, really unique.
Very cool, very cool. And we have this right here, Nahualo.
Nahualo. This is another Mexican-based reader. He's this is by Mario Daniel Garza Ledesma, who originally created Nahualo, and later on in later volumes was joined in by a co-writer, Juan Manuel Colin Monroy, who I have actually collaborated with on my own comic.
Yeah, he also collaborates with me in my comic Rey Soltonati. So
very cool.
He's kind of on the scene in the background.
So this is actually a spin-off of his comic, based in the same universe.
Is this the one where they fight the star deities?
Yeah.
They get summoned. Yeah. Okay, yeah, I've read this one.
Very cool.
I was super impressed.
Oh, Zima. So this is by a Mexican artist, Arendera, and so she actually makes little comics and stuff, but in indigenous languages. So she does stuff in Nahuatl and in Purepecha. I think she's descended from the Purepecha. So, and she's been learning both languages. So this is something that's quite valuable, I think.
Very cool. So in
it's actually like a COVID-19 thing.
This is really interesting. Something that's interesting about comics is that they can also be utilized for informational purposes. And something that's interesting that I've seen that's been consistent with Mesoamerican comics is that they tend to have this interesting combination of being kind of like almost an historical introduction to Mesoamerican culture, customs, lifestyle, politics in some occasion, even their like mythologies in some sense. And so they kind of are in some ways a living and breathing, sometimes fictitious, but also based on actual historical, accurate types of information, correct?
It's like a modern codex.
Yeah. And in some ways, you've mentioned this, Daniel, it's kind of almost like what you were doing with your comic Zots, as you are too, Louise and Darren, continue the tradition of what, said past ancestries of what these cultures have been doing for like hundreds of years. And in some way kind of putting in a more like modern comic book context as far as the way it's visually presented, but still taking ideas and sampling some of those concepts to which you are able to kind of share this history and this culture.
Exactly.
Very cool. Very cool. So these are some of the contemporary examples that we have of some current artists, but now we're going to kind of get into what you guys create and what that has entailed. Something that I think that's really interesting that you guys have shared with me is the importance of research. As someone who's also a creator, is inspired by history, research tends to be something, especially in context of historical research, tends to be an enormous source of inspiration. So I wanted to just have us take a look at what kind of work you guys have done recently and kind of talk about how you made this and what kind of research this entailed. Were there any challenges or were there anything interesting that you found out that might have inspired you to make these pieces? So let's take a look.
I guess I'm going first.
Yeah, Darren, this is your piece.
Yeah, so this is a page from a comic I'm currently developing about the rain deity Tlaloc. And so part of the research that I did for this piece was to really look to, there was definitely some artistic license taken, but I really had to, I really wanted to portray these figures here are the Teteo, which are the deities of the Mexica or the Aztec. I call them Mexica just because that's what they called themselves. But they each are portrayed in a unique way. And it has to do with what they represent and what their role is in the Mexica cosmovision. And so I really wanted to shy away from a lot of the times, you see Aztec gods and they have the big feathered headdress and the loincloth, and that's about it. And it's sort of a generic depiction. But I really wanted to portray them in a way that was truly representative. And so that was the primary drive for my research. What was great about being sort of a younger, well, not an age, but just a newer creator, is I was able to kind of rely on the research of others, such as including Daniel and Louise, really they had, and other creators had done so much work describing these things that I was able to rely on the research of others and have to do less research myself, which is another advantage of doing research, is you not only help your own projects, but you help other creators better understand what they're trying to do and better portray what their own projects in an accurate way. So some of the things here you can see is obviously this guy in the foreground is Tlaloc, and he's always depicted with these around his eyes and these goggle eyes, and then this sort of mouthpiece with fangs. If you can zoom in, and that's one of his hallmark. That's one of his hallmark features, even down to his necklace. There is a shell. A lot of the times the glyph for water in, this is the rain god, by the way. I don't know if I said that again, but so water, rain, right? You have which in the Nahuatl language is Arce. And usually the glyph for that is this stream of water, but then there's little shells along the sides, almost like a river, when it washes down and washes all the shells onto the bank. And so that's why he's wearing shells, and you can see on his arms, there's that glyph. It's a little grainy because of the image quality, but and to his right, that's who's the patroness of waters and rivers. So she also has shell imagery. Coyolxauhqui, which is next to her, is one of the moon deities, and those little white dots on her hair are eagle down, and they which indicate sacrifice. And so it kind of has to do with her story, because she was part of the way she ended up becoming the moon was through sacrifice and dismemberment.
Wow.
The guy in the center there, that's Xipetotec. He's usually depicted, he's a god of renewal, and so he's usually depicted wearing like a shed skin. And so that was important. And so you can kind of see how it's important to research symbols to portray the correct meaning. Do I have another slide on here?
Yes, you do. And we'll take a look at this one next right here.
Okay, great. So this is this is a little blurb as part of depicting the creation story. This is the legend of the 5 sons as well, which Louise has worked a lot more on, and actually her work was a really big inspiration for this piece. So you can see how someone else's research, really helps. Oh, do we have a question?
Yeah, it takes a look. We have about 7 minutes left.
Yeah.
From an audience creative work, how do you negotiate into the pool to give the reader a full primer on the history so they have context with telling the story if you want to tell it? And what are some of the challenges you run into when researching Mesoamerican history and cultures? So yeah, that's something that we definitely should dive into a little bit. So I remember, Darren, you were talking about how finding certain sources of, especially from different, because from what you've told me, you've kind of started your journey with Mesoamerican comic books 2 years ago. And
Right.
So in many ways, you're still learning a lot, but you've also like dug deep to find sources and information. And in some cases, I remember you mentioning how you were looking towards talking to even indigenous leaders of the communities and stuff. And you remember telling us a little bit how those have been challenging as well.
Yeah, so in addition to reading books and things like that, and looking at the works of other artists, I've tried to collaborate with my local Danza Azteca group to really see what knowledge they have to share, and kind of they have been a part of my journey in learning about these things, and not just them, but other sources kind of on the internet and things like that. And sometimes, I found that, I'll hear one thing from one place and another thing that's contradictory from another source, whether it's literary or out of an oral history. And it can be challenging to decide, which one do I hold on to, and which one do I believe. And I think it's important to kind of take both into consideration when you're doing your research, because something in a book, is kind of limited, has a limited perspective, and there are still indigenous people that are here and visible, and they still have things to say. That's part of the reason we're still focusing on this, how many 500 years later.
Right.
So it's important to take that into account as well. And you can kind of, I think the more sources you have, the bigger and more clear of a picture you have when you want to portray the Mesoamerican culture. So
right.
Yeah,
So
I think it's really important also when you look at sources, you have to think about what the motivation was behind it, because
go ahead.
Yeah, it really depends on like when the Spaniards have written down something, it's going to be for a sort of certain motivation. And even different indigenous groups, they will write remarks about the other one. So you end up with
promote a lineage.
Yeah, so you get that. That's why you often find a lot of contradictory
sources
in many
ways,
these.
It sounds like to me sometimes even indigenous communities set trip us sometimes and trying to one up each other in some ways.
You have the example of the Aztecs burning the books. I think under Tlacailel, the books of the previously. So
right,
not a
very interesting. Wow. So Louise, let's take a look at
how much time have we got now to go through the rest of the work?
We've only got a couple minutes left,
so damn.
I know, it flew by.
Yeah,
I wanted to take a look at this particular image because I feel like this one has the most looks like a lot of the influences to which we were talking about. Could you tell us a little bit what it took to?
Oh, right, yeah. So this is one of the first pages in my comic. It's set in Tonatiuh-chan, which is basically his sun palace, Tonatiuh's sun palace, the sun god. And he so I had a look at a lot of Aztec murals, and you have to yeah, I had a look at the symbolism and things to try to sort of put some things. For example, you have the eagles, you have the butterflies. All of this is associated with him. So I decorated them using the palette, the specific color palette that you find in Aztec palaces. They've found kind of murals in Tenochtitlan,
Right.
in the sort of ruins there. So I really heavily based it on that. And you see also the Cihuateteo. And because this is set in modern day, but he's kind of still in his palace, but I decided to throw in reference of some female warriors, because
Very
so
cool.
in the afternoon he has so women who die in childbirth, they are given this warrior sort of status. And so they join him in the afternoon as he moves across the sky. And so in modern day, you're obviously going to have some female soldiers, so added them in there. So they all have their sort of uniforms, but to give like a little blend, I thought it would be fun if one of them had the kind of army.
That was great.
Trousers
and see, that's what I like, the flexibility to still put some stuff of the artist's intent and interests inside the historical context, despite if it's historically
because I mean this is because this is set in modern era, what's happening here, so
which is really interesting. I love the camo here. I'm gonna move forward to Daniel. But we will have links up for everybody's work here if you want to see more. So I'm gonna skip through this real quick. This is the comic book that I've been working on. It's not entirely Mesoamerican at all, but it is still based on a lot of historical research. It's a graphic novel that me and my collaborator have been working on, which we'll send a link as well at the end of the panel. So Daniel, go ahead and give us a quick talk about the page and what kind of research this entailed to put together.
So this is just in the midst of a pretty intense battle. One of the characters, he's seeing kind of a premonition, basically, of his impending fate.
Right. Awesome. And then a couple examples, but there's one example I wanted to share, and how one of the last things we want to mention is how we can still, as artists, take Mesoamerican inspired work and kind of put them in a kind of different setting and unique setting. So could you tell us a little bit about this amazing project that's
this is
our collaboration.
Dream Writer. It's a sci-fi Mesoamerican comic that I developed with Louise. We worked on the script together. I did the illustration, and it's I'll be talking about this more on social media.
Upcoming
pretty soon.
project.
Right. Awesome.
To look forward to.
Awesome. Well, I think that is we're out of time, but I just want to make sure everyone knows it's been a great chat talking about Mesoamerican comics. I hope the audience really enjoyed that. There's plenty of people still carrying on this tradition, and just remember, stories matter. The stories to which we share matter, and the research to which we do is extremely important in order to humanize and depict historical stories in a human light, but also in an accurate light as close as we can. So I hope this was interesting for everybody. And I want to just make sure that we all thank Dr. Theresa Rojas for helping us host this today. Thank you so much. And thanks everybody for watching.
Thank you. A magnificent panel. I so wish we were in person. I think if we were in person, though, we would have trouble getting the crowds out of the room for this panel.
You're so kind.
Lots of wonderful comments on the stream about interacting with your work and looking forward to interacting with your work. And I have shared social for all of you, and we'll definitely put that in the recording so folks know how to get a hold of you. Wonderful. And I just want to say, thanks so much. And I'm going to say this now. I see that there is a need to have some kind of a special panel that we do outside of the festival, sponsored by the festival, that is just about this, maybe an hour and a half or so, kind of a a larger version of the C2 creators in conversation, because I want to know more, and I was, distracted behind the scenes. I want to focus more, and I saw all of those additional images, so I would love to be able to give you an opportunity to show those. So I look forward to bringing you back.
Awesome.
Oh, thank you.
Yay, you win. Thank you so much. I'm going to say goodbye to you now, and so that we can bring our next panelist. But Louise, Dustin, Daniel, and Darren, fabulous panel. Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Bye,
All right,
everyone. For folks in our audience, we will be offboarding our current panel, and we're going to keep the live stream going as we bring in our next group of panelists for our punk feminism panel. And so I'm going to go ahead and get that started. And I want to remind you that the live stream, we're going to keep going through our first several panels, and then the last couple of panels for the day are pre-records. Those are already scheduled, and those will automatically run at their scheduled times. But we're really looking forward to the next panel. And as we bring folks on board, you can go ahead and turn on your video. And it looks like we have a couple of people coming in. And hi, Sharon, nice to meet you. This is a really cool panel because I don't know most of the people who are coming on board. I do know Breena. Hey, Breena, great to see you. Breena's one of my favorite people. Don't tell her I said that. But welcome to both of you. Sharon will be moderating the next panel. And this is a panel that I haven't seen before. So I'm super excited about this one and about our chat for this one. And we are now just waiting for the next panelists, and we have about 3 minutes, and we will start right on time. And how are you doing? You know what? I'm going to say I love the in-between chit chat. So I'm just going to throw that up. How are you doing? How are you handling things? Sharon, great to meet you.
Yes, igual. Thank you for having us. I'm so excited about this. It's like also, it's totally an excuse to hang out with folks that I love. So
100%. And you should see me. I don't know what is wrong with me, but whenever I'm at a convention and Breena's there, I like sidle up to her and I'm like, Breena, how are you? There's just like a magnet. And she's probably like, this lady, always up on me. So why?
Get her away from the table. No. I miss you, Theresa.
Yeah, and we've been on panels together too, so that's been a lot of fun. I really appreciated that. So Sharon, where are you broadcasting from?
From Manhattan, from New York.
Fantastic. We are national across the country. We have, I mentioned this earlier, we have some international folks as well.
Oh, that's awesome.
But I love that. I love that we're able to do this, right? And to have you all the way from New York. And Breena, where are you from? Are you in the East Bay right now?
No, we got priced out, but we're in the city.
Oh, you're in the city. Oh, wow. You're in the city.
Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, my family's in the city, and I'm like, I'm in Modesto.
Yeah, and you're a mission baby, right?
That's where I will be. What was that?
You're like a mission baby.
Yeah, yes, I am. I'm a mission baby. That sounds so weird. That sounds kind of scandalous, actually. Yes, I'm a mission. I don't like to talk about it, but yes, I'm a mission baby. I grew up in the Mission District of San Francisco. Going to La Cumbre, my favorite taqueria, right there on 16th and Valencia. Oh.
I'm like, food, always. And you talk about food, I'm like, please.
Yes, tell me more. This is one of the hard things about, I spent a lot of time in the Midwest, and it was a great, I went to I worked at the University of Michigan. I went to Eastern Michigan University for my master's. I went to Ohio State for the PhD, and then I went to Boston. But I was just like, the food, the California, as far as Mexican food is concerned, when I came back, I was just like, give me all the things, right? And then Modesto is a whole other world of fabulousness. So I'm like, yes, I'm home. a home, and now I have a COVID baby waiting to hatch. Another, I mean, it's not a real baby. It's a COVID
I thought it
baby.
was real.
Oh yeah, I was like,
sorry.
wow. I mean, congrats.
Yeah, it looks like a real baby, but it's a COVID baby.
Yay, and Daisy is here also. I get really, I love, hey, how are you?
I'm good. How are you all?
Good,
Great
good.
to see you. Wonderful to meet you. Wonderful to meet you. We're going to go ahead and jump in and get started. We have hopefully another couple of folks joining us, and we'll just, I'll let them in, I promise, as we're moving forward. But I want to ask, Daisy, is your name pronounced Races? Is that right?
Yeah, but you could just call me Daisy.
Okay, fabulous. So I'm going to go ahead and
Theresa, just really quickly, sorry, I know I updated this before, but just in case, it is going to be just Breena, Daisy, and I.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. So I will go ahead and update that so I don't say other people's names. Awesome. That means everyone's here, even better. So we will jump in and get started. And I'm going to bring up my little document. So welcome back to the Latinx Comic Arts Festival. We are based in Modesto, California, located in the heart of the California Central Valley. The festival highlights Latinx cartoonists, writers, animators, artists, and comic arts educators. I'm Dr. Theresa Rojas, the festival director. I'm also a professor of English and professor of ethnic studies at Modesto Junior College, where the physical festival is held and where I'm hoping that we will be back in person next year, right? We're also celebrating our centennial, so it would be fabulous for us to be able to all come together in one place. Our next panel, I'm incredibly excited about: Punk Feminism, Feminist Zines of Latin America and their Diaspora, featuring Sharon De La Cruz. She will be moderating, Daisy, Julia Valencia, and I'm sorry, it's not Daisy Ruiz. It wasn't on my paper. So Daisy Ruiz and Breena Nunez. As an introduction to the panel, a zine is a small circulation, self-published work of original or appropriated texts and images, usually reproduced via a photocopier, and is the product of either a single person or of a very small group. In this session, we'll explore how the medium of zines continues to nourish the punk feminism scene in Latin America and its diaspora in the United States. Panelists will present their work and speak to how zines influenced their understanding of feminism, the differences and similarities between the medium in the US and Latin America, archiving zines, and the future of punk feminism. So I'm going to hand over the reins to Sharon and become an audience member. I'm incredibly excited. Again, I know I said that twice, but I don't care. I'm not sorry. Thank you so much, and take it away.
Hi, thank you so much, Dr. Theresa Rojas and the Latinx Comics and Arts Festival for having us. Again, my name is Sharon De La Cruz. I'm a comics writer, illustrator, and educator from New York. I'm always repping the BX. So you tell me that, and I'm always doing this. Honestly, today I'm just like truly honored to be joined by Breena Nunez and Daisy Ruiz. And we'll be in conversation and very like casual conversation discussing punk feminism, feminist zines from Latin America, the Caribbean, and their diaspora. I'm going to start by sharing my screen. Breena, you'll go first, introducing yourself and your work, then Daisy, and then we'll hop into some questions that I had, but then also we can round up some audience questions as well. So I'm going to share my screen now. Awesome. And can you give me a thumbs up if you can see that? Yeah, okay, cool. I'm just gonna go view and present, and you also might hear my dog because this is where we're at. Great. So let me see. Yeah, there we go. And you can start, Breena.
Cool. Hi, I'm Breena Nunez. I'm based in the city or San Francisco. And yeah, also teacher of zines and comics. I started out in youth education, and I was in love with just like being able to have the freedom to use the classroom as a space to talk about zines and comics to youth. And eventually, I guess, quote unquote, graduated to teaching in higher ed and SFSU and California College of the Arts. I'm a quirky Afro-descendiente with roots in El Salvador and Guatemala. But yeah, I was born and raised in the Bay Area, and I call myself a sandwich because I am so many things and I love hamburgers. And yeah, I'm a freelance cartoonist as well. I do a lot of memoir, a little bit of journalism, comics, but it all started with self-publishing through zines and through collective organizing as a student from San Francisco State University. And yeah, I guess we can go to the next theme. Okay, sorry, I'm a little soft-spoken. I'll speak a little louder. One of the organizations I was a part of as an undergrad was Mecha, like a Chicano student organization, but our chapter was really special because it was just not really focused on like Mexican like nationalism per se, since a lot of us don't even identify as Mexican. As y'all already know, I'm Central American, and some of us came from different groups, although we also had folks who self-identified as Chicanx or Chicano, Chicana. And it's where I found a lot of community and chosen family, people who really inspired me to give myself this sense of agency through zines. And through Mecha, I collaborated on a zine. Can't recall the name, wow. And I designed the cover years ago. Aging is not looking so graceful on me right now. But after some of us graduated from San Francisco State, we just still wanted to organize and get together. So some of us who identified as women, as femmes, we created this group called Mujeres al Frente. And 2013 was a really big year. I think personally and collectively, we all wanted to have this conversation about addressing anti-Blackness in the Latinx community. And I remember it was my friend Itza who really wanted to address this concern. And we decided to make this zine called Raza for Black Lives, this bridge called Unity. And it's a beautiful collection of personal stories, a lot of resources and education on the prison, from school to prison pipeline, you know, how there's still a need for us to band together despite the anti-Blackness and despite the differences that we may see in our communities. But at this time, I was really reflecting on a comic that some people might be familiar with that comes from Latin America, specifically Mexico, El Memín Penguin. I could be mixing up the title a little bit, but it's a comic my Guatemalan side grew up like reading, and I just remembered being a kid and finding this comic and wondering like, who is this like ape-looking child? And when I asked my mom like who this character was, she told me, oh, this is a little boy. Memín is this like Black child. And I think for most of my life, I've been racialized to be Black, but I definitely internalized anti-Blackness throughout most of my existence until 2013, and realized I had a visceral reaction to this, and it didn't feel right for me to hear that this character, this main character of this comic, is a little Black youth who is depicted in essentially, like basically blackface. So this was like the very first, I guess, political comic I've ever made, slash autobiographical comic. And yeah, we can go to the next thing. And then I don't know, revisited a lot of questions and really wanted to find some kind of semblance of Blackness in the Salvadoran community and in our diaspora, since I claim my Afro descendancy from my Salvadoran side. And I was raised by mostly my mestiza mother on my Guatemalan side. So the the imposter syndrome was hella real because I definitely was just um, really settling in and just like living out this truth of what does it mean to be like Latina. It means to be mestiza, like to be just ethnically mixed with indigenous and like European or Spanish heritage and blood. But I kind of like just couldn't fathom like why do I happen to not feel Latina enough when people assume that I might be from Ethiopia, Colombia, Brazil, like all of these countries with a densely Black population. But being Black in El Salvador is still a very foreign concept. So a little bit of internet stuff and a little bit of self-reflection. And it was me just trying to ask myself if I can even claim Blackness and if this is something that other Salvadorans are asking themselves. So as much as it was like for me to like use this zine to create this sense of agency for myself, I also didn't realize it was kind of like this calling card to other Afrodescendientes. And yeah. Oh, whoops. Well, that's okay. This is a punk feminist scene. Some of this, I think I forgot to like rearrange some of the pictures um, differently on the next slide. But I also really love zines, and I'm really happy to be on this panel because it really helped me dig back into the recesses of like my memory file banks, like in my brain, and revisited projects that I wanted to create to encapsulate my love for music, my love for being just like a weirdo who also just love enjoying and studying different genres of music like classical, jazz. I feel like I didn't really get into punk like at an earlier time in comparison to other folks. It came way later in my life and through student organizing again. And after graduating from college, I also wanted to take back my love for music because I at one point wanted to be like a classical musician, like play for the San Francisco Symphony, but because I didn't see a lot of people that looked like me, there were just experiences I've had with just like super like egotistical men that took up too much space, like made music seem like a very competitive and like capitalistic space. But if it wasn't for people like Nina Simone and John Coltrane, like just studying their spiritual connection and like their politics with music, it just made so much sense for me to dive into it and to use like a mini zine to describe, you know, like to me, like that represents punk. Like you can definitely defy like all of these boxes that people try to like um, label you with, like especially if you're a Black musician, like you can't pursue a career in classical because that's not your genre, right? But listening to them just made me realize, oh wait, it could be a little bit of everything, and it's a lot of remixing, and I feel like they were doing all of that in their time. And a little bit of like Susie and the Banshees also inspired me to like be experimental with zines too, and to honor like the strange and also just like the sadness that kind of comes with like our existence within the diasporas. Like we be crying all the time. We also have a lot of music that's really just dark and heavy because colonization is it's um it's a violence that we will still experience and that we've inherited, you know, through like intergenerational trauma. And also something beautiful about zines. I don't know if we could like, if we're able to jump to the next slide, if there's another one floating around. Yeah, there's something magic about like zine culture. I made this one zine at this one punk show, this festival called Think and Die Thinking that used to take place in San Jose, and it was really just centered on POC and queer representation. It just felt like such a beautiful space, and I just drew all of the bands that I really loved on stage, and one of them was No Bone, and I drew one of my friends who would be my soon-to-be bandmate like several years ago. I was in a band that was like combination punk soul or neo soul. And me and my friend Estela, who would play drums and guitar, we were talking about that show, and I think I might have shown her like the portrait or the zine that I made. And she was like, "Dude, you drew me like my band back then, and now we're here." Like, there's some power to like drawing and creating. And I don't know how else to describe it, but there's definitely something that happens when you are creating. There's this like unspoken intention that these are going to be the people that are going to be a part of your circle, that are going to be a part of your tribe, and who you will continue to co-create with. And if it wasn't for this band, Los Sirenas, I feel like I also wouldn't have taken back this sense of agency that I really wanted for a really long time. And yeah, I'll stop talking now and before I start crying from reminiscing, but yeah, I'm excited to hear what you have to say, Daisy.
Yeah, thank you so much, Breena. Go for it, Daisy.
Hi. So can you? Okay. I'm Daisy. I started making zines like in 2017. I started it because my friends and I from college, we had all experienced like not getting the best critiques in class because our work was more like race-based. And so we created a zine called Derasto NYC, which, yeah, if you could go to the next slide, please. Yeah, and it was like about, not exactly about music or being punk or anything like that, but just experiencing life as a low-income minority in neighborhoods in New York. I specifically did one about the Bronx and how like I went to a bodega. I got a bacon, egg, and cheese for a man called Tony Vega, but then I turn around and then there's like a white man there, and I'm like, what the hell is this a white man doing here? So and then it ends with like the buildings, and it's like it says the hood. And this zine won an award at the Broken Zine Fest in Canada, which was great because it kind of showed me that there are people that are listening to our stories, and that even like this zine, we were able to print it because it was all of us putting money together to print it, because we were all like working, and it's like New York rent prices are crazy, so you spend most of your money on rent. So like us coming together and like self-publishing this, like that was really awesome. And if you could go to the next slide, please. Yeah, and so now I work with my friends Julia and Rachel, and we make zines about like what it's like to be like a first generation American girl. And like my friend Rachel, her family's like from Jamaica, and then Julia, she's like Central American, and then my family's from Mexico. So I write stories more about like my memories from my past. Like my mom, she got me a Herbalife. Like the Herbalife was for her, but she said that I should take it because I was too skinny. And then I gained like 40 pounds in a span of a month, and then like my belly got big and everything like that. And so then I started getting bullied by my own family about like how big I had gotten, even though they're the ones that gave me the Herbalife. And so it's kind of like saying how if you're like more indigenous looking and you don't have like a big butt or like a big boobs and stuff like that, like you're not seen the same as other Latinas on TV like Thalia and Selena and all like the popular singers. Cause even there's like popular singers that are skinny, but it's not, they're skinny, you know, like it's not like they're not referred to as like La India Maria and stuff like that. So I'm just trying to like normalize like bodies of everyone. Yeah. And then if you can go to the next slide, please. And so like now what I've been doing, which I guess now goes into being a punk of color, like Zuli and Mia asked me to do this art for Odiosas, and they throw a party called Emo Night in the Bronx. And that was so amazing to me when I first went to their party, because back like when I was a teenager, the scene was mostly white people. And I never really felt comfortable like going to the parties because I was like, oh well, I'm not white. Like I would up the saturation, not the saturation, the exposure to make myself lighter, like back in the day. And then just like hearing kids in my high school call other like Black kids like, oh, like you're not really emo because like you're a poser, you know. And it's like, well, they listen to the same music as us, so what's the poser in it? So I really enjoy doing this project for them, and like mostly putting Black people to the forefront because they're the ones that got the most like flack from other people, saying like, oh, you can't wear this, you can't wear that. But then there's like cyber goths that are wearing like the fake dreads. Yeah, so that and another part that I really enjoyed was just showing how like low income communities have so many subcultures within them. Like it's not just like hip hop in the Bronx. Like there's punks, there's emos. Yes. And then the next slide, please. And so it brings me to doing this zine for Destiny. She took a lot of pictures during the time where a lot of punk shows were being thrown. And it's kind of amazing because that time, it was very like politically driven too, because these parties were also like community collaborations and like having people vent at them as well, and then using the money collected to like donate to places like community centers and stuff like that. And just another thing that was really great was how venues in the Bronx like gave people a space to be themselves. And also like it was really easy to go to a punk show if it's in the Bronx instead of having to go all the way to Brooklyn. And yeah, it's called The Way We Were. It's pretty awesome. Yeah. And that's it.
Thank you all so much. So first of all, I'm like this is another excuse for me to just like put people together and say how amazing you are. And also that like, I love y'all's work. So thank you. Yeah, thank you for that. I have a couple of questions, but honestly, this is more like casual, you know, than just me asking a question. So if there's any questions that y'all want to ask each other too in between, please, I'm more than happy. Like we can make this more of a conversation. But I guess, and y'all answered this a little bit already, but I'll ask it again. I used the word punk feminism, right? When I was putting this panel together to describe like raw intersectional feminism. And like, I'm aware that you may or may not necessarily identify as like a punk feminist. So my question is for both of you, you know, like how have zines as a medium help you explore like that feminism? And we've seen it in some of the examples that you all put together. But was it a single moment where you were like, aha, now I understand feminism, you know, or like, how did you get to exploring that a little bit? And anyone can answer. I know that's a that one's a juicy one. I'm sorry. Well, you mentioned, you know, like, and I'll start with maybe with Daisy, you know, like the Herbalife story is so wild, you know, that's like such a wild story. And to be able to not only obviously experience it, but draw it out and to talk through what that means, not only for you, but just representation, period. What was that experience like, right? Like that's definitely exploring feminism in there for sure.
Well, it's kind of crazy because we're going through like the body positivity movement right now within feminism, but then it's like they'll show like chubby bodies, but it'll show like the really curvaceous chubby bodies. So, and I don't know how to explain it. I guess I just want everyone to feel included. And I don't, because I at first I used to have like a bad connotation of feminism because my mom, she used to work for like affluent white ladies in like the Lower East Side, and they would have like their feminist parties and stuff like that, and my mom, she would be serving them. So it was, for me, it was kind of like I always saw feminism as like a white centered space, not really open to like I guess migrant women, Black women, low income people who like don't have access to that language and stuff like that. So I just want to open up the conversation more. Yeah. And to have it be like stories that are relatable, because you know Herbalife is like a scam, and they scam women, like especially like migrant mestizos who like go and then they sell the product to their own family members and stuff like that. So yeah, and then also Herbalife, they'll be like, oh, like this is a way for you to build your business and stuff, especially to like women, be like, oh, like you can be your own boss, but then you're not really your own boss because like most of the money is going towards like Herbalife anyways.
Right. Oh, and there's so much in there that like I want to talk about. I'm like, oh man, there's like capitalism, you know, 101 is, you know, slapped all over that. And then just also like what that means, again, like you said, Daisy, selling that back to your own family, you know, that's like so deep that I don't even know how to explain it. I'm like, damn, all right, there's just a lot happening in there, but also, you know, like what does it mean that that's like a vulnerable market too, you know, and like how that taps into like other people's feminism or not, you know, or like or just even not even feminism, but like representation.
And also like in like Latin American TV, like they scam you so much. Like it'll be like, oh, like buy this tincture of the rose that fell from the Virgin Mary's like picture or something like that. It's like so much like through like religion and like appearances and like wanting to look like the famous stars on TV and stuff like that. Yeah.
For sure. Thank you for that, Breena. I know I'm like cracking up off of the rose just slowly trickling down. Do you have anything to add to that?
I feel like Daisy just said everything. I was just here to listen, like to all of this, not listen.
Yeah.
But I guess to answer the question about like that aha moment, like when was this like the moment where I encountered feminism? I think it was definitely through just being around so many mujeres who I couldn't help but see myself in their stories, and we were just nerds in this academic space. But we also were really open to criticizing the academy and centering our family stories and hearing about dissertations being written inspired by like just families' migration stories, maybe experiences with being incarcerated or just having to be a child and not having a parent present because they were, you know, a part of the system, you know, they were locked up. And yeah, I feel like if it weren't for like all of these like badass femmes in those days, like as an undergrad, I don't know where I'd be. And I still consider them to be like these chosen siblings that magically appeared in my life. And I guess to echo again, for me, as far as also being able to claim musician, I didn't call myself like a musician for a really long time because I felt like, oh, I'm not really like, I can't really say that because I'm not playing music. And I felt a little self-conscious when I used to, I think I made a sign at a zine fest actually, and I said I was a musician. And then somebody was asking me for a YouTube channel. They're like, well, you're not really like making music if you don't have a YouTube channel. And I even had a moment where I'm like, I guess I'm not because of this, but then, yeah, fuck all that. Like, you can call yourself like whatever you want to be. I feel like even as like zine folks, as people who make comics, like we don't need to feel so married to that title. We can be whatever we choose to be, like whether you're a ceramist at one point or a baker, like whatever it is you're calling at that moment, like you can call yourself that.
Yeah, I'm gonna take some audience question. I just want to ask one more question though, because it's come up both in Daisy and Breena, and I have a personal connection to this as well. Is you're talking about your undergrad experience. So the way I describe how I came into my queerness was in an all-white, historically white institution. That's how I learned about my queerness, which is so problematic. And so, you know, I wanted to just like acknowledge the organizing that was happening in your undergrad respective schools, right, institutions, but also like what that meant for you. For example, like for me, you know, understanding, like coming into my queerness was one thing, but then coming into my queerness in a historically white institution, I was like, oh man, this is a problem. So I guess for you all, if there is, if you have something to say about coming into your like, into yourself, right? And organizing with other BIPOC folks in undergrad, what did that look like, feel like? Was it natural? Did you spot out all of the other BIPOC folks and say, come here, you know, like what did that look like for you?
I guess personally, I'm not queer, but in FIT there's a place called the Game Room, and so and also I was part of a program called the Equal Opportunity Program in FIT, and so through that program I was able to meet other BPOC folks because like they had us like meet each other and like interact with other people in other departments of the school, and then we would, when like school actually started, we started hanging out in the game room, and then it was like, oh, like you're also like a person of color, like, oh, you're from the Bronx too, oh, like you're from the hood, like, okay, like let's hang out, you know, and stuff like that. So that's how I found my community. And then outside of that, just like it's zine fairs that have connected me to other people, and like zine fairs and like going to all the punk shows in Brooklyn and in the Bronx, and like connecting to other people who are like, hey, like I have this event, do you want a table at it? Cool. And then you like go and you meet them, and it's like you're partying, but then you're also like vending at the event. Yeah, so that's how I met everyone.
Breena, is there another magical space like the Game Room? Because now I'm like, I gotta go to the game room.
I wish it was the game room for me. We have this thing called, I was just talking about it with my homegirl, the one former bandmate slash current friend, chosen family. The Depot doesn't sound as like arcade like centric as the game room ones. I really wish we had something like that, but I feel like for San Francisco State having that history of it being like the first college establishing like ethnic studies, like I think it was natural for me to like gravitate to like these Latino studies classes, and I just ended up taking a bunch because I just needed something else to balance out like classes from taking fine art classes, graphic design classes. I mean, those departments were pretty diverse within themselves, but I don't know, there's just something about taking an ethnic studies that just helped me like retain my sanity. And then you start noticing like, okay, like this person is also like taking the same design classes as me, like maybe like we'll like confide in each other and talk about like, hey, like this class is whack, but how are you doing in the Latino studies class? And yeah, if it weren't for just like those homies that happen to be taking like design classes, art classes, and an ethnic studies class, I wouldn't have gotten into student organizing. And yeah, like Daisy just like took me back to sweet memories of just like going out, like dancing and going to the Castro to see my very first drag show, where Juju B was like the headliner.
Oh, yes.
It was crazy. I loved it. There was like a time like I loved going out, and I wasn't out to myself. I denied that queerness for a very long time until maybe post college, where I just realized, oh wait, yeah, there's this thing called genderqueer also. Like, what is that? Like, and in those like student organizing spaces too, man, it was just so safe to be femme, to be like questioning yourself too in terms of like how you identify in terms of gender. And your sexuality. But then yeah, we would be so into just being ratchety like during finals. Like dancing, intermission, and then going to shows in Oakland, like going back and forth on the bridge. That's like going to church for me.
That's awesome. So we're gonna take some questions from the audience. Y'all ready? The first question is from Caitlin, and they ask, I would love to hear about how self-adornment practices like makeup and clothing factored into y'all's expression as punk feminists, or if these practices appear at all in your works.
Yeah, I don't really focus too much on adornment in my work, except maybe for like this one time I did a small illustration series that I didn't realize it was queer art that I was making until someone like claimed it as that after they saw my stuff at a zine fest and said, yeah, this is queer. And then I was like, what? Like, damn it, the repression in like my—
No, that's so real. That's so real. That's so real.
It's weird. It's like, so it definitely speaks to like how art is therapy. And I definitely feel like zines and art definitely have saved me in those moments where I really wanted to come out, but I didn't have the words to say it. And I've been pretty shy for most of my life. I'm not a really verbose person, but I'm glad that somebody like another queer person of color was able to see the queerness in me through the art.
That's awesome.
Well, I feel like lately I've been adorning like my the characters that I put into more like fashion that reflects the identity, like how I did in the thing I did for Odiosas. Like I had like the girl with like the black lipstick and like her piercings and stuff, and then like braids in different colors. And yeah, I feel like my fashion, the people that I looked towards like for fashion were like people in my class in like high school and stuff like that. Like I would be like, oh, like Christian just bought like a new studded belt. Like I'm gonna go get one, but it's gonna be like silver and pink. Or like when I was in middle school, like I've been making more art about like the early 2000s, and so like it takes me back to the time when me and my god sister went to Knickerbocker Avenue and we got like name belts and stuff like that, and incorporating like name belts and like Pepe jeans and like
I refuse to throw my name belt out. I have it in a box somewhere, but refuse to throw it out. It's such a sentimental cultural item, you know, like you're just like, no, this is, I wore this one time with like hella pride, you know?
Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay, we only have a couple minutes left, so I'm going to get into some more questions. We got a shout out from our wonderful friend, Trinidad Escobar, who's like amazing. And then Edith asks for Breena, what age did you start creating comics?
My attempt to make a comic was like around like second or third grade. So I think that was what, 7, 8, and it was like totally not politically correct because I grew up in South San Francisco with a lot of Mexican kids. Everybody on like this comic book cover was like wearing a sombrero, or they're like luchadores.
I'm glad that happened in like second grade, you know what I mean? And then you're just like, yo, you get right?
Yeah,
and we grow.
It was messy back then. But then I stopped because, yeah, going back to wanting to be a musician, a classical musician, I was like, okay, like, I don't think art's gonna be my thing, but we're just gonna put it on the back burner until like years later when I really need comics to save my life.
Awesome. There's another question from Fernanda Diaz, who asks, I would like to listen to your thoughts on what our mothers mean to us and how we can or not consider them feminists. That's a big one. Yeah. And I'll just start really quickly too. I think for me, I learned my like hood feminism from my mom. And that's the feminism I'm claiming, you know, but it's interesting that it's like, when for me, hood feminism is not white, and is also it is a gray area of like, and it's not respectable, you know, like it's like there's a, yeah, hood feminism is just like it is not, you know, wearing a nice tidy skirt, you know. So for me, it's pretty raw, and sometimes there's room in there for flaws. I don't know if I want to like name it that, you know, but like there's room for growth. And I feel, Daisy, when you talked about like feminism earlier, and you know, and you tell me if I'm wrong, but it felt like, you know, maybe your mom maybe couldn't identify with with that particular feminism, not only because it was like white and not her, you know, but maybe like, is there room for growth in that, you know, like what does it look like and feel like? So if y'all want to answer that.
Well, my mom, she's kind of like brainwashed by Christianity. Like she'll still say things like, oh, well, if you go outside and you're wearing a skirt, like of course you're gonna get like catcalled and stuff like that, so you shouldn't wear that. So I feel like her she does I don't think my mom embodies like feminism, but what I can learn from her is just like what not to do and like how to speak up for myself instead of like getting taken advantage of. Um yeah, cuz like I don't know, sometimes our mothers can be our biggest haters, to be honest, cuz sometimes I kind of feel like they were repressed by their own mothers, like coming from someone who's like being raised in the 60s. They can be like pretty repressed, especially like because my mom is Mexican, so she kind of has like that whole like put like thinking that God is a man and that you gotta like serve your husband and stuff like that. So I don't know. I would say my mom is my biggest hater, and what I've learned is to like just not follow those footsteps. Um, but I've had also like other mother figures who like my teachers and like my counselors from like FIT, from like the EOP program, of like just seeing them be like um, Black educated women who like put in the time to educate other young women to like know their value. So that's that's what I've gotten out of it.
No, yeah, thank you for that. I think, yeah, just to like uplift that a little more is one, understanding what you do not want is like, I think really important. So thank you for like uplifting that, and then uplifting other mother figures in your life, you know, like that's my real. So thank you for that. I don't know if Breena, if you want to add to that.
Yeah, like I hella resonate with that because I grew up in born and raised in Christianity. Not baptized though, so I'm going to hell, maybe. But growing up, being raised by a single mother for a really long time, I definitely couldn't help but just idolize my mother, and also learning and reflecting on what that younger version of myself needed whenever she felt that tinge of like, oh, like actually um, not loving yourself when you look at yourself in the mirror, and being told that you're getting fat and it's not a good thing to be fat, is something I can't avoid like revisiting and seeing like that younger version of myself wanting to be told like, hey, like it's fine, you're going to be in like a really dope place in your future. And yeah, picking and choosing, I think the lessons that they they gave us, and I agree with you, Daisy, is something that I I try to take into account for myself. But overall, I do see my mom as not being feminist, also like per se, like theoretically like a feminist, like from like the lens of like academia or like feminist scholarship, but she definitely taught me how you're definitely not alone in this world, and there's definitely room for you to grow and to love yourself. She I don't think she even knew like those words self-love like growing up. And some of the things that she would practice were like taking long breaks whenever you're not feeling well, just like emotionally like distraught from whether that be isolation or just like not having a good day. Like she would take my older brother, me, to have like these long walks like near the forests and like the San Andreas Fault. And yeah, if anything, she told me or taught me how a lot of things can be accessible, like when you, I don't know, just give yourself the time and the space to enjoy solitude. I don't even know if that's like a feminist like approach to loving yourself, but she did it through her actions and not her words. And I feel like that kind of
makes me realize this is why like we're also artists too. Like I think I do a lot of self-reflection and a lot of just like personal growth by doing action via making art, making music, and that's a gift that you're giving yourself. And yeah, but it's also like again, I definitely resonate with like the moments where you realize, yo, like my mom is kind of like saying these things to me, telling me how my body should look because this is what she also received too, unfortunately. And it's like, man, I guess a question I have for y'all is like, how can we help them know that it's okay for them to like feel also like upset at the patriarchy that we live in and that's so prevalent in our culture?
Yeah, that's super real. I know we don't have enough time. We're out of time, but that was like such a, like powerful way to like leave this session. So thank you, Breena. But one is I also want to tell y'all that in the comments, people are like praising you all for being vulnerable and amazing and just like telling your truth. And honestly, from the bottom of my heart, seriously, thank y'all so much for just like being here and being y'all. Just really quickly though, unmute and say where people can find your stuff, your work, all that jazz.
Well, you can find me at Drazys, DRAZYS on Instagram, or you can also follow my collaborative work with my friends at Spicy Mango Comics. Yeah. Oh, and thank you for having me. I have fun.
Yeah, thank you. Breena, where can we find you?
For both Twitter and Instagram at Breenache, BREENACHE, and yeah, breenache.com if you want the full bio and other things you want to see on that website. And thank you for this dope ass panel. I love seeing y'all's faces right now.
Yeah, thank you so much. And you can find me at Instagram at Sharon De La Cruz. It's a long ass name, but that's my name. And you can find me there. Thank you again, Theresa, for having us.
Thank you all. What a wonderful panel. And we're getting lots and lots of feedback. So a couple of things are happening. We're getting the live feed comments and people just giving all the feels, but also really getting into these ideas of not just empowerment, but of creating it in your own voice, right? To really connect to what you've been talking about. When you were talking about moms, I have a very complicated, or I had, my mom has passed now, very complicated. Oh, I just got it. It was like, I don't know where they came from, man. Thanks a lot. So, but you can tell, that people are really connecting. So that's happening. And then I'm getting email and then I'm getting text messages about this panel. So we are off to an amazing start. I love this so much. I love having met new folks, Sharon, Daisy, and of course, Breena, as always, wonderful to see you. So I cannot wait to be in touch with you again. And I would absolutely love to have you all in Modesto in person. I hope that you'll be able to join us. And thank you again for a wonderful panel. So I wish we could have, actual loud applause all around. Thank you so much. Have a fabulous weekend and keep doing what you do. Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone. So for folks in the live stream, we are going to be onboarding our next group, our next group of panelists. They are on their way in right now. Our next panel is Borderland, Cryptids, and Legends. So we will be letting everyone in and I will get to meet some new folks. Hi, Ray, how are you? And Javier, welcome. It's great to meet you. I am excited for this panel, as I am for all the panels, but also I'm a little nervous because I'm a big chicken. So I love hearing these stories and the connections and about research related to our, I don't know if you use the term supernatural, I sort of go back and forth between that, but of course, coming from a family that's very situated, and I was talking to Ray about this in ideas of La Llorona and things that the stories we tell, especially children, and that we're told growing up, and the effect it has on us. So I'm being drawn in at once, and then I'm kind of like, it goes back there. I know. So I'm really looking forward to this panel. And let's see. So we've got 1, 2. So we're waiting for one person, right? So we've got Oliver. We're waiting for Francisco. Is he still coming?
Francisco is at work. He couldn't get off. So.
Oh, okay. He should have told me. I would have written him a note. People ask me to do that, by the way, every once in a while. Can you write me a note? And I'm like, I'm a college professor. I'm not sure that that's going to help you out at all whatsoever. So, all right, cool. Well, we've got 5 minutes before our panel officially starts, and I would love to just, chat with you a little bit. Where is everyone broadcasting from? Oliver, where are you?
I'm from Ciudad Juárez.
Ciudad Juárez.
Yeah.
Awesome. Welcome. And how about Javier?
¿Qué tal? I'm from Chihuahua, down here. Just a quick question. Are we in the back room? I thought we were live.
We are live right now.
Oh, okay.
We are live. So cuidado, right?
Yeah, it was worded a little bit weird, like we're still in the back room, but I'm seeing the live button. So
yeah. So what happened was, and this is for the audience too, information. So we're finishing up the other panel, and there's a tiny bit of a delay. And so the people who are coming on board, who are waiting for the next panel, are in the green room, the virtual green room. Sorry, there are no snacks or anything. There would be if we were in Modesto. We had a whole green room with snacks. We had pupusas.
I remember.
Yeah. So, and then we finish up the panel, and then those folks leave, and then we bring the new folks, and we have a couple of minutes. Sometimes the panel goes a little bit longer, which is why I have that 10-minute cushion there. So folks get to see everything, because it's easier for us not to turn things off and then have people kind of go back and forth. We just keep it moving and then chat in between. So as they say, you get to see how the sausage is made.
Super cool. Let's get to Ray then, because he's the big guy here with our topic today.
Yeah, fabulous.
Can you guys hear me? Is that
you're a little quiet. I can hear you, but it's a little on the quiet
I can
side.
hear you just right, Ray.
Just right. Trying to get this
fabulous
mic. How's that? Is that better?
And Ray, are you in El Paso?
Yes, ma'am. I am in El Paso right now. Right. I mean, I could throw a rock and hit Juárez. That's how close we are. So.
Oh wow. I love that shirt. I want that shirt.
Oh, thank you. I'm actually wearing this in an anniversary, because when we went to the Modesto last time in 2019, I was wearing this shirt, and you had Jose Garcia there doing his art. He was doing the art. He's the one that drew these. He's the one that did the homies and everything like that.
Oh yeah. Awesome.
And it's funny because I was wearing this exact shirt, and I walked into the bathroom to use it, and he's there. And I turn around, and he's like, "Hey, that's my shirt." And I'm like, "I'm sorry, sir, this is my shirt." He's like, "No, I drew that shirt." And I'm like, "Oh, that's awesome." And he's like, put his hand out to shake mine, and I'm like, "Let me just wash my hands real quick." And then I washed my hands, and I shook his hand, and I'm like, "This is awesome." And I have quite a few shirts of his. They're really, really popular down here. And actually, he was checking it because he says that a lot of people bootleg his shirts. And,
so let me see.
Yeah, and I'm like, I paid quite a bit for this, so I know it's not bootleg. He's like, no, it's good. You're good. And I'm like, okay, thank you. So that
shirt has the stamp of approval and everything.
Yes, ma'am.
That is amazing.
That's why I decided to wear it.
Well, I wanted to let you know that we have Jennifer in the background. She is collecting questions from the live feed, so you'll see that in the chat. You'll want to just kind of pay attention. She will put those into the chat for you, and you can pick those questions up if you'd like to answer them as you go along. You can answer them in the end, whatever works for you. And then if you have social media info that you'd like to put in the chat, she will put that over into the YouTube live stream. And then later on, once we have everything is recorded and all set, we'll put in notes, and we'll put in your contact info into the description for the video. Sound good?
Awesome. Sounds awesome.
Yeah, love it. All right, well, we just have a minute to go, and then we will get started. We've got more folks coming into the live stream. It looks like as it gets a little bit later, we've got lots more folks participating.
Yeah, there's
and
like
it
31
is,
people. Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, so far so good. And that will be shared and shared and shared, and we will be rebroadcasting that quite a bit. So we'll get lots of eyes on this for you.
Very cool.
We're going to go ahead and get started. It is 1 o'clock.
Okay.
So for folks just joining us, welcome to the Latinx Comic Arts Festival 2021 virtual edition. I'm Dr. Theresa Rojas, Festival Director and Latinx creator superfan, apparently. Somebody called me that earlier, and it is true, absolutely true. I'm also a professor of English and a professor of ethnic studies at Modesto Junior College, where the physical festival is held. And we are hoping to have an in-person festival next year, along with our celebration of the centennial for Modesto Junior College. The festival highlights Latinx cartoonists, writers, animators, artists, and comic arts educators. It's also an opportunity to demonstrate the incredible range of art and writing that Latinx creators are producing, researching, and innovating. And I think this next panel really demonstrates that. So our next panel is Borderland Cryptids and Legends, La Llorona, Chupacabras, La Lechuza, and more. And we have Ray Ramos, who will be moderating, Francisco Arce, Oliver Lee Arce, and Javier Gutierrez. So cryptids are beings that exist without scientific evidence. Cryptozoologist Ray Ramos leads this discussion on the effects that cryptids, such as La Llorona, have on our culture and the way that the mythologies of the Latinx community and beyond are interpreted and represented in comics and mainstream media, for better and for worse. So I am going to hand over the reins to Ray Ramos, and let's get started. Thank you guys for being here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Rojas. Thank you for the opportunity, all of the Latinx viewers for the Comic-Con. We do miss Modesto, so hopefully next year we will see you there. I am your ever humble host, Mr. Ray Ramos. I go by Happy Harry Hardon on our live stream, so you're more than welcome to watch us, on the weekdays when we have our live streams. And of course, joining with me today is...
Hey, this is Oliver Lee Arce, illustrator, colorist for 6x6 Comics. How's it going, guys?
I guess this is an introduction again. This is real quick. Javier Gutierrez. I'm also a comic artist from Chihuahua.
We are currently missing our brother Francisco Arce. He is indisposed. He's at work, actually. Hopefully, I was hoping he would be here, but unfortunately he's not. But we will try to soldier on without him. Yeah, we do comics here in El Paso, Juarez. We try to raise awareness of the Borderland region using our comic books as a vehicle for our messages and for the situation that the Borderland finds itself. It seems more and more nowadays the Borderland is in the news, and there's a lot of negative press. The negative outweighs the positive, and we try to work in the positive using the comic book media that we have loved for so long, that we have a passion for. So is there anything you want to say really quickly, Oli, or Francisco? I'm sorry, or Xavier?
Real quick, Ray, I think that's a good title for you, Cryptologist Ray Ramos. I think you're on your way to become the Carlos Trejo from, from the US.
No.
Instead of Ghost.
For context, everybody, Carlos Trejo is a supposed ghostbuster over here in Mexico. Don't believe anything he says. So
he's not even. He's not only a ghostbuster. He's like a Harley Davidson guy and a troublemaker. I think he's a professional ghost hunter, troublemaker, and I really enjoy all the content he creates.
I heard that he likes to punch ghosts in the face and chupacabras in the face and stuff like that. So hopefully not, man. I don't want to end up doing that. Punch ghosts or ride a Harley. I just want to bring you the information that I have and try to make it as relevant as possible to what we're talking about today. And that's what we're here to do today, to discuss cryptids, paranormal, I guess, situations that are very relevant here in the Borderland. Naming quite a few right off the top of my head, of course, La Llorona, La Lechuza, the Chupacabras, all of these have been in the media in some way, shape, or form in recent years, especially La Llorona. La Llorona has been growing quite a cult following. It's in mainstream media, in both film and books, and even TV shows. A few times I've seen. So we're here to bring you some awareness about La Llorona. Some of the I guess, I don't know what you would call them, antiquated thoughts that come along with La Llorona itself. I'm sorry, I missed the question. Let me see if I can see it real quick. What was that question?
What are the origins of the lechuza? Is it born out of the culture of La Frontera, or does it go back to our indigenous peoples?
Ooh, nice one. Okay, so we'll get into the lechuza first. Seems that people are very interested in that. So the lechuza was born out of the mysticism as far as brujas and brujos, the nahual, the tonal, things of that nature. The mysticism, the sorcery of our Native American ancestors. The first time that I heard about the legend of the lechuza was listening to a Yaqui shaman describe brujos and brujas as well, that would use their powers for good and for evil. So there's white magic, and of course there's black magic. And most brujos tend to gravitate towards the black magic, and brujas as well. I'm just going to use the term brujo in general. And part of it is shape-shifting in order to spy on their enemies, in order to cause fear, in order to do certain things that in normal form or human form, they would not be able to get away with, or they will be recognized. The lechuza is one of those forms that they would take. So the lechuza is an owl, is a giant owl that appears in strange places that you would not expect this animal to appear. And that's one of the first clues that you're dealing with a lechuza, which is a brujo turned into an owl. It's supposed to be a bad omen. It brings mischief, and not only that, but just bad luck in general. And it does derive from our Native American heritage, from our ancestors that had to deal with these things. Once it got dark, and the only thing that you had to keep away the darkness was the fire, and these stories would spring up. And of course, the shaman was a very revered part of our Native American tribes. People would go to him not only for knowledge, but for cures, for anything that ailed the community, which was the tribe itself. And the shamans went bad sometimes, and that's where that idea of the shape-shifting into different animals sprang from. That they would do that in order to cause mischief, to cause trouble, to acquire more power for themselves. And that is how the lechuza came about.
The lechuza is going to be a great start point for this talk, because from the list I saw, I think lechuza is the one with the most potential to cross-reference, because I've been getting into all the Native American and south of the US ones over the last few months and years. But the ones I kind of know from all my life are the ones down here in Mexico. And in the case of lechuza, brujas, and other things, there's an interesting segue. There's some sort of, I don't want to say misconception, but I think there's two different kind of creatures or phenomenons that oftenly get intersected or confused one with each other. One is the one you are mentioning, Ray, the classic bruja or witch, or I don't know, human entity that can transform and literally transform into an owl, or I don't know, other kind of animals. Those are the ones a lot of people in Mexico call brujas or witches. But at the same time, there's another one, or another different kind that is exactly called the same thing. It's also called a bruja, but that one is when you are in a forest or in some zone alejado de la ciudad, some sort of far away from the city zone, and you, especially near bodies of water, when you see a light or a series of lights that are floating around the water, those are also called in Mexico brujas, but they sometimes refer to the animals, and they sometimes refer to the lights that are floating around. And that's something I knew for a couple of years now. And just recently I discovered that those light brujas are existing in other countries, in other continents even. and I had the chance to cross-reference that with the ones in I don't know if it's England or Ireland, but those exist with the very same description, but they are named Will of the Wisp, I believe. So for me, it's super interesting that the same thing is described in Mexico and is described in another continent as in one as brujas and in other as spirits or whatever, will of the wisps. And researching and all that even took me to know that there's also a Spanish name for it. I mean here, but we almost never use that. We are accustomed to the brujas one. We supposedly the correct name to call them is fuego fatuo. That is some kind of mystic fire name. But just so we get clear, there's when you say brujas in Mexico, you can refer to two completely different creatures or beasts. So that is something that I wanted to discuss from a long time in our streams, right? And now I got the perfect chance to get you on this topic.
So Javi, those lights that you see floating around the rivers or lakes, do they materialize into beings or what's
I don't know if they materialize. What I read a lot is that they're supposedly natural phenomena that can be explained, but it hasn't been explained to this date.
Okay.
But it's really interesting that you can have reports of it in completely different places of the world. And at least down here in Mexico, we tend to connect them with, I guess there was some misconception down in the years and somebody started calling them brujas, or I don't know, somebody made their relation with the literally owls. But I just want to say that a lot of people say brujas and say la lechuza, and sometimes they can refer to one and sometimes can refer to the other, and maybe even they are the same entity. But well, again, we have no idea what the hell these are because it is not explained.
What were you gonna say, Oli? I'm sorry.
No, the fireballs, because I remember Marcos, our other writer for Six Faces Comics, saying that he had an uncle that would invoke them. He would build a bonfire, and throw like little cuentas. They're like, I don't know what they're called, but the little like wooden spheres.
Yeah.
And he would throw them in the fire, and then he would see a fireball come down from the mountains del cerro, and by doing that, he would be the witch or the entity would be under his command. So he would like order them, hey, bring me this. I need alcohol. I need food, or I need something, and they would bring them to him, just as long as he would like throw the little spheres in the fire. So that's pretty interesting.
That is interesting.
I don't know if it's true, but we use that anecdote in one of our comics too. So yes, if it's real or not, it's awesome.
It was in the X-Men comic.
No, in Conorante.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Which Pancho was here, so you could talk about that. Really quickly, just to touch on something that Javi said about the different I guess societies different across the world that have similar descriptions of this legend. There is a legend in England that you mentioned about this phenomenon called corpse light, and corpse light is something that's also been witnessed in this area, and anywhere that there's a cemetery. Legend has it that if you go at a certain time, and this kind of lines up with the lechuza or the owl or the witch motif, because of course usually cemeteries were placed away from the village, so you would have to travel in order to visit a cemetery, because they villagers were not happy having the dead so close to where the living were, so you would have to travel. Well, yeah, exactly, in Mexico, but like in more rural areas and stuff like that. I'm sorry, more rural areas, they had them separated, so you would have to travel through the woods and stuff, and of course you would see animals that were familiar from that area, and of course you would associate whatever you saw with whatever you experienced as well when you were visiting the cemetery. Now there's this thing called corpse light. back in the day before there was embalming, the body would go through its decomposition and the gas would build up inside of the bodies because they were not embalmed, and that gas would have to go somewhere. And when it would go somewhere, it would come out through the ground, and just depending on the conditions, you would see that light. It was called corpse light. It was these gas, I guess, entities, or not entities, but these gas illuminations, and they would connect that to whatever was happening around them. So if you see, for example, an owl come and rest on one of the cemetery headstones, and then you turn, and for example, if you're there at the right time, at the right moment, and you saw the corpse light, that would, connect, and you'd be like, oh my God, it's a witch, and this is, a ghost, and everything is connected. And of course, it just spurned that idea that these animals, these owls, or whatever it is that you would see, were associated with that. And since it's the dead, and of course we have the natural fear of the dead, we would associate that with paranormal, with ghosts, with things that we cannot explain, because we follow a certain path, and that's beyond the path or off the path. And that's just something I wanted to touch on with Javi really quickly right there. But
so what does one do when you see a lechuza stalking you, or somewhere walking, when you're walking at night or something? Because we've seen two of them.
Yeah, I've seen quite a few. I've had a few experiences with lechuzas. Now, I'm being a little bit biased because I have seen a lot of things that are associated with the paranormal. So it's hard for me. I straddle the fence when it comes to believing and non-believing, because there's certain things that can be explained, and there's certain things that I've witnessed myself that cannot be explained. The lechuza being one of them. Of course, I haven't seen a woman transform, or a man for that matter, transform into an animal, but I have seen things that you would think like, oh, only a brujo would be able to do something like that. But then again, it comes back to that whole thing. If you give something enough power, then you not only believe it, but they'll believe in you, and if you will manifest it eventually.
Tulpas.
That's a whole other thing right there.
That reminds me, Ray. I don't know if you were aware of this article, but in 2014 there was a group of women that captured a lechuza. It was in La Campana, and I suck at pronouncing these words, but it's Tlahualilo. There's a video of it on YouTube that they captured this lechuza, and they burned it alive, fearing that it was a bruja. I don't know if you're aware of that.
I believe I've seen that video. I haven't seen the burning of it, but I think they had it in a cage, didn't they? Yeah. Yes, and it does look odd.
Yeah.
Do you have a picture of that by any chance, so we could show the audience?
Yeah, let me zoom. How do you?
And that's another thing too that comes into play when we're talking about such things. These animals, they live in the forest. They're not you don't see them unless you're out looking for them. And there it is. If you see this and you've never experienced this, what are you going to think immediately? Like, oh my God, I can't explain that. Look at the eyes on this. Look at the eyes on the owl. Obviously, it looks like something very different. I'm sorry, go ahead, Javi.
I didn't want to get into this detail because I think it's sad. It's really sad for me.
Yeah, it is.
This one is derived from ignorance of people, and it involves animal cruelty. So I get what you say, Ray, about the contextual and the cultural things coming from years before. But these ones are really sad because this is obviously not a witch or whatever. It's just an animal that could look alien to people, and it wasn't even in like a tribal place, or it was just really a really far away town in some state of Mexico.
Yeah,
and it's kind of sad thinking that stuff that you get from world to world. I think you camera fell off, Oli. And that's just it. It is just sad. It's just sad. I get the cryptozoology part of the unknown, of unknown creatures.
Yeah.
And I get that these people believe that this is not an animal, that they believe this is a human being in disguise, but it doesn't stop being sad. And this, I guess this is where comes the important part of really trying to go searching for the truth, but never getting crazy, never getting to Carlos Trejo on that regard.
Not going to fanatism, no, being a fanatic.
Yes, exactly. And you touch on a very important point right there, Javi. The fact is that we always are looking for something to blame. It's our nature as humans because we're never at fault. So, for example, and it's parallel once again because you've heard these stories on and on and on, since time immemorial. If it's something that bothers you, if it's something that bothers the herd mentality, then you're going to try to get rid of it as much as possible. You're going to try to ostracize it. You're going to try to make sure that it is confined or destroyed. And it comes back to, for example, the Salem witch trials. Women were accusing other women that they may have had issues with of being witches. And what happens? They bring them in, they put them to trial, and there's no way out of it. They put them to death. And the same thing would happen.
That's where the witch hunt term comes from.
The witch hunt term comes from. And the same thing would happen with tribes. Of course, not everyone is perfect. And even in native tribes and our ancestors, if there was a tribe and the shaman, of course, once again, comes back to that. He had the most power in the tribe. If someone goes against him or someone was outspoken to him, especially women, they were ostracized. They were considered evil. They were considered witches. Esa mujer es una lechuza, se convierte en un animal, nos está afectando a nosotros. She's taking the power away from the man. And of course, that's where you have your issues. And that's where women would become targeted by other people, members of the tribe, members of the village. Usually they were the shaman, usually they were men in power, and they would be like, okay, we have to get rid of them. We have to put them to death. We have to exile them from the village. And that's when the legends would start.
Yes.
And I'm sorry.
And that being said, I also believe that there's some evil creatures lurking down there.
Oh, yes, of course.
Just so we're clear. You guys have access to the comments on YouTube? Because there's I'm reading some really interesting ones and a couple questions too.
Yes, I'm reading some of the comments on the YouTubes. Let me see if I can get it here.
Because there's Clark Aston, and he says, hello, I'm Juan Manuel, the writer of Nahualo, Mexican webcomic to use the Mexican myths and urban legends as inspiration for the main plot. Mm-hmm. My main question, but real quick, I think we've known each other. I don't remember if in person, but we used to chat a lot about our comics. If that's you, Juan, greetings, welcome. And he says something really interesting about skinwalkers and what you were saying about the different places. Mm-hmm. Skinwalker folklore in the frontier, because I see some similarities with the Nahuali from the center and south of Mexico. Mm-hmm. And there is a confusion sometimes between skinwalker and Nahuali, but they are completely different in my opinion.
Yes, and I agree with that. On the main point of that is the skinwalker was actually someone that was searching for this power, someone that would go out of their way in order to get this darkness inside of them in order to have power over people. The lechuza is a different story, I think. Like I was saying, they were targeted, they were ostracized. Of course, there's going to be some bad apples in the bunch that are doing the same thing, that are looking for power, that are looking to have some sort of dominance over their village, over their situation, over their tribe. But yeah, I can see that. I can see the difference as well. He goes on to say the problem with the superstitions of the Mexican folk of rural areas is that they see the supernatural beings as part of balance in their common life. And mostly the dangerous ones have more power. For example, the sacralization of certain natural resources, the landscape like rivers, mountains, and at the same time, the beings that protect and destroy. Yes, exactly. That's a really, really good point. Because of course, I believe in it, man. I mean, there's no way around it. I really quickly, because we're talking about a certain type of cryptid, but just to touch on it, Bigfoot, Sasquatch has been noted since time immemorial. Again, since we have recorded history, people have been seeing this thing out in the woods, out in the forest, even in the desert in El Paso. But that's a whole other story. These are guardians. These are guardians of nature. These are the earth is in tune with these guardians. And of course, if you go into their habitat and you disrupt certain things, they're going to appear to you, and you're going to see them. You're going to see what nature is all about. So you have to be careful when you tread that line, when you're starting to go down that path. So I mean that comes back to the whole you don't see everything that's really going on out there. So I hope that kind of answers the question a little bit. Well, you had something to say, Javi?
And not really, but a lot of people getting into Bigfoot and if it's evil or not. A lot of people seem to think as Bigfoot as some reclusive creature that is it has some kind of don't bother me and I will not bother you agenda, but
I could live with that.
Getting to see a lot of relatos of accounts from people, some videos and some cases, like the one I'm thinking a lot of the case of the father that got his kid lost in some national park. You must know about that one, Ray. He lost. He went from with his kid camping. The kid got lost. He started with the park rangers a search throughout the park. A couple days passed, and the park rangers called for a national agency. And this father didn't gave up with the search of his kid, and then he basically did the police work, and he discovered that there was some witness account a couple miles that day in the national park. It was a family that saw a big hairy creature holding something in his shoulder, like he was I don't know how to say cargando a bulto in his shoulder.
He was carrying his child.
So once you see all the accounts and all the suspicious stuff going on, you could arm a narrative that a Bigfoot basically secuestró, snook, kidnapped this kid and take it with no certain provocation. He just took it and got the hell out of there.
Did they rescue the kid, Javi?
Oh, he was never found.
Oh crap! I was a good ending.
It's a really well documented one. That's what I'm mentioning it.
Wow, what a downer.
I think I may have heard on the 411 the missing stories that they have. I think I may have heard that one. There's other stories like that as well. To get into it really quickly, as far as Sasquatch is concerned, but usually the Sasquatch that are mentioned are docile creatures that try to help the situation. There was one story that was very similar to what you're talking about, where a child went missing and they found him later. And when they found him, they asked him, like, where were you? How did you survive? How did you stay warm? And the child told them, well, there was a bear, and the bear took care of me, and the bear would carry me around, and the bear would feed me and would take me to where it slept. And they asked him, like, well, where did the bear sleep? And they were like, oh, he slept in a cave with a bunch of other bears, but he would always pick me up and carry me to take me to eat and to take me to get water and then bring me back to the cave. Now, will a bear really do that, or would something else do that? And I think it would be
Yogi Bear would.
Yogi Bear. He's just looking for picnic baskets, brother. That's all he's looking for. But I mean, that's a lot of stuff that happens that we hear about. And of course, the research that we have to do in order to find out if this is fact or fiction. And I think the Dr. Rojas had a question about that, about what type of research we do in order to find out. A lot of it is oral research. A lot of it is talking to people that have had experiences, sharing our own personal experiences. Like myself, I've had a lot of personal experiences dealing with the paranormal and dealing with cryptids and things that I cannot explain. The biggest one of them all being, before we get into that, question from Ashton Clark. I didn't read it. I'm sorry. Can you read it?
Let's keep on with what Dr. Rojas says. So in the comic that we're working on right now, the Cryptoids, there's a character based on La Llorona. So what was your research for that one, Ray?
See, when I was a kid, I had an experience with La Llorona, and I cannot explain it away. I've gone over it in my head. I've talked about it with people, and I have no sort of explanation for it. So I have to say that it was La Llorona. I have to say that it was something that is unexplainable. What is more common in frontier, cryptids or ghosts? That's a good one. Really quickly to answer that question, it's kind of a balance because, well, actually, it used to be more ghosts, But now it seems like the cryptids is on the rise, especially in the borderland. Just last week, I was reading an article about Bigfoot sightings in Horizon City, which is very near from where I am presently at. Maybe it's around 20 to 30 minutes away. This area where there were sightings of this desert ape, is what they call it, and this stretches back quite a few years. There were sightings of it in the 80s, in the 90s, in the early 2000s. They've seen this desert ape slash Sasquatch type creature living out in the desert, using the caves as its home and stuff like that. So right now it seems like that type of encounter is rising, and the ghosts are still there. That's a whole other story, as far as the ghost sightings in El Paso and in Juarez, because this place is very, very haunted. But getting back to what I was talking about, when I was a kid, I experienced something that I can only attribute it to being La Llorona. I was staying at my, the quick, version of it. I was staying at my, this is La Llorona. This is the concept art that we have for La Llorona in the Cryptonodes itself. And we'll get into that character right now. But I was staying at my sister's house. She lived in a very rural area back then. And when I get together with my family, I seem to turn to taco spirits. How significant is cult? What is it? Cult what? How significant is culture and oral tradition to creating cryptid and ghost stories? Oh, well, let me tell you that. So I would spend time with my sister in this rural area, and all we had to do was just sit around and talk up until this one point. And in that area where she lived at, there wasn't a lot of things that were going on. There was mostly like families that wanted to get away from the city and go out to the country and kind of like be hidden and not be so much in the city life, as it was more attuned to the rural area where everyone would be left alone. So I would go visit her, and behind her house was a canal, an irrigation canal. But these canals are huge, and there was fields in the back and stuff like that. And I went to go visit her. And long story short, my brother-in-law had a satellite dish, so we were going to watch some questionable stuff in the middle of the night. I was about 12 years old. That's how age dated I am. So we started watching this stuff at about midnight, because you have to turn the satellite at a certain area at night in order to get the reception, get the transmission. And started watching this, and we both fell asleep. Now, the way that the room was set up, it was immediately to a door that led into the driveway out into the street. And I was lying on one couch, he was lying on another couch, and I started hearing this banging sound that woke me up. I would say it was maybe like 3 in the morning, of course, 3:30 in the morning. That's the time that everything seems to happen. And I heard this banging, and I thought that it was him. I thought it was my brother-in-law that had been locked out of the house. So I got up and I went to the door to open it. The dogs that were outside were going crazy. They were barking like mad. I went to the door to open the door. The banging continued. As I put my hand on the door handle to open it, my brother-in-law sits up from the couch that he was sleeping on, and he says, "Wait, don't open the door. That's La Llorona. If you open the door, La Llorona will come in here and will take us all." And I looked at him like, "What? Are you crazy?" And just when I had that thought in my head, right before I said anything, I heard it. I heard the wail, the mythical wail of La Llorona, screaming, yelling, moaning, crying right outside the door. And it was louder than hell. And it was just right there. And I remember that door being a thick oak door. And whatever it was right on the other side of that door. The dogs stopped barking. Everything seemed to stop and be like frozen in time. And I had this compulsion to open the door. I was compelled to open the door. And I wanted to see so badly what was behind that door as they kept crying. But the thing that scared me the most, and to this day, and I told everybody the same story over and over again, but to this day, even talking about it, once again, I get chills, is the thing took a breath. It took a breath. That's what scared me the most, because it sounded like someone trying to breathe underwater, trying to catch a breath underwater, and there was no possibility of it. And I heard it, and it stuck in my head, and to this day, I cannot explain it away. And it kept going. It seemed like forever, and finally it stopped. And when it stopped, there was these bright, shining rays of light that came in through the cracks in the cinder blocks in under the door. It was like daylight. That's how bright the light was, how powerful the light was. And then it sort of dimmed. And during this time, my sister had come out of the back and she had told me, to come and sit down on the couch. And I managed to get away from the door. And I sat down on the couch and I was witnessing all this stuff going on. And I couldn't explain it away. And everyone, of course, is like, oh, no, it was your brother-in-law's family playing a trick on you and all this other stuff. But, that's a weird time to do that. And why would anyone go to that measure to do that? And how would they be able to produce the same effect in order to play a trick? I mean, this was back in the 80s. And I had no explanation. There was nothing that anyone ever told me that could explain that away. My sister once did tell me that she saw La Llorona, like with her own eyes, in the backyard. Once again, remember, the canal was behind her house. She saw her standing there. And she described her to me as having dark black hair, wearing kind of like a gown, but it was very lacy, but very dirty at the same time. And that her eyes looked like someone had been crying like endlessly, just very sunken, and just rows upon rows of what she described as when your skin is in water for a very long time and it kind of like puckers up and it's all
like a prune.
Like prune, thank you, like prune. And she said that she saw her and she blinked and it was gone, and she had never seen it again after that. And to this day, that has always bothered me. It has always haunted me. Like, what did I witness? And that right there, that situation, that experience caused just a chain reaction throughout my life of experiencing other paranormal occurrences, other entities, other things that came along with that one. It was like my gateway drug into the paranormal world. It was crazy. So I started doing research on La Llorona, and I started looking into the legends. And of course, everybody knows the legend of La Llorona. She was a woman scorned. Man rejected her. So she went and she drowned her children in the river, and she couldn't take the grief, and then she drowned herself. And I started looking deeper into that, and I couldn't understand why she was always portrayed in that light. Why was she always the bad guy? Why was someone always talking about this woman as being the one at fault for being human? And it bothered me. It bothered me to no end. And I took it upon myself to try and change that idea of her. Even as of late, if you have seen mainstream media, they portray La Llorona as this creature, as this woman that's here to like disrupt your family, to destroy what you love, to take what you love, because her love was denied to her. And it bothered me, man. It does not sit well with me. And I'm trying to humanize her. I'm trying to explain why what happened to her, and how someone can come back from that. We all can be forgiven. We all can find a way to be redeemed. And that's what the Cryptoids is about. That's why she's in the book. She's one of the main heroes in the book. She is a hero to me. She is someone that has been misunderstood all this time. This is my version of La Llorona right here. And we're using our passion for our comics in order to make her story more available to everybody. We have a campaign that's going to be going on pretty soon, but this is what La Llorona, I think, looks like now in modern times. Of course, she adapts and all that other stuff. But I think that there's a story there worth telling that no one has ever touched on how someone that has been broken, someone that has, haven't had everything taken away from her, can come back and be bigger than she ever was before. And that's what I'm trying to do with her story in the Cryptoids, because her story isn't done. It's far from done, and it's not just locked into that one little tiny, cliche that everybody goes along with, especially as of late with mainstream media. So these are some of the pages right here that we have for the Cryptoids and La Llorona as well. Do you want to add anything to that, Javi or Oliver?
To Olive?
No, man, you said it well, man.
Another thing too is I associate La Llorona with a lot of the evil that has happened in Juarez. Now, when I say that, I don't mean it that it's her fault. I mean it that she is more or less the patron saint of all the bad that has happened to women in Juarez. The femicides that started happening since 1993, when they found those 8 women in a field, and that just caused, once again, a chain reaction in Juarez of this violence towards women, and how no one would, the daughters, mothers, aunts, friends, sisters would go missing, and no one would have any sort of explanation as to what happened to them. And I believe that the Llorona is the patron saint of these women that have gone missing, that have been extraviadas, to use the word, and no one can explain where they went, It's once again, the tears that have been shed for all these people that some here in the US would not think twice about even considering. That's where her story is now. That's where it's actually beginning now. So forget the past of La Llorona. She is something that is becoming very, very clear to me as as we go on producing our books and producing the stuff that we're doing with our stories. So I don't know. I'm getting really preachy right now, so maybe I should stop right there. Oliver, Javier, and Ray, would you discuss our process? I forgot the rest of that.
So somebody's asking about our horror anthology, Oliver.
Oh, the
somebody that bought it some years ago, and some other person that is asking about the name of the anthology.
So when we went to Modesto, 2019, right, Ray?
Yes, it was in March 2019.
Yeah, we premiered the Border, Ñañaras the Border, which was a collection of short horror stories that dealt with life in the border, no? So we had one of La Llorona. We had one of kids coming from El Paso to the strip to go drinking, underage drinking, obviously, and the initiation of a kid joining the cartel, no, Ray? So
yes, exactly. The initiation of how a boy becomes a man in the cartel culture. That was one of our most controversial stories that we had, man. I'm sorry, did we lose Oliver?
Yeah, a bit.
Oh,
but also, so super good luck telling people in the chat the name of the book. I'm not talking about the explanation of the word, but the literally word, how you write it and how you pronounce it.
Ñañaras. I think he's looking for the cover to the book so that people can see it. But it's pretty much a little translation of the heebie-jeebies, I guess you could say.
Yeah,
this is the book that we produced.
For people listening to us that doesn't speak a noun on Spanish, the ñañaras word is a really interesting one because it's a double ñ.
Yeah, we have and actually in the book I included the translation.
Can you show the word again?
Yeah, it's ñañaras. Can you? I have them mirrored over here. Can you see it?
No, we can see it. Yeah.
So yeah, it says ñañaras. Noun: discomfort or anxiety caused by an unpleasant situation, particularly one that is frightful. Creeps. And also over here, it means a ticklish sensation in your bottom. So. Yeah,
what? I don't remember that.
You don't remember that? That's the other definition, Ray.
Oh wow! I always thought it meant like the heebie-jeebies. Like
yeah, it is that. It is that. The creeps.
Are those in translation? Yes. When we went to Modesto, we actually had those books with us, and we sold out, didn't we?
Yeah.
And we sold out of those books.
Thank you.
Yes, exactly. We're in the process of perhaps printing some more, so we'll keep you in the loop on that as soon as we get more information on that, because a lot of people have asked for that book because it deals with a lot of stuff that seems to be very border oriented, and that's why we named the book The Border, or Ñañaras Border.
Any more questions, Ray? Or
I think there was another question touching back on La Llorona about how misogyny has affected, I guess, La Llorona, and yeah, that's perfectly true. The misogynistic ways, the machismo, things that we find south of the border, and of course, in this part of the U.S., has affected the legend because, of course, once again, we're always looking for someone to blame, and who are we going to blame immediately? But women. Men usually blame women for all of their mistakes and all of their faults, which is not the case, man. And in the legend of La Llorona, that comes true very, very clear in the fact that she was blamed for this man looking away from whatever it is that he had already going on in his life. He had his family, he had his kid, and she was the cause of his downfall. And because he chose not to accept her into his life, she turned around and did something drastic and murdered her children and murdered herself. And that comes into play with the misogyny aspect of that type of relationship. I think Pancho could phrase that a little bit better, but unfortunately he's not.
Okay,
here.
speaking of La Llorona, I'm going to get real into the supposition territory. I'm going to go real theoretical with this, but
do it.
You see how when I was a kid, it was a really lame story for me. Like it was some kind of your standard ghost made up story about somebody that is gonna get you if you stay up late at night.
Yeah.
And then since time passed on and I got a little bit more interested in unknown things, and especially listening to Ray research on the topic, you see how La Llorona is usually the earliest that her legend or whatever is related to is los tiempos de la conquista, the pre-Hispanic times, more likely the pre-Hispanic times in Mexico, in the Aztec Empire and all that. That some accounts tell you that she was originally a human that got some personal family tragedy and that died in the water and something like that, and that's how a lot of people try to tell you that the story evolved. But the thing is that I don't see the mythology or the way this entity acts too related to your usual ghost stuff, because I'm not even that into ghosts as a believer, but the usual ghost accounts tell you that they usually stay in one place and are more related to the place where they died or etc. And the thing with La Llorona is that when you describe the bodies of water, I don't know how it's attracted to some sort of zones of the American continent, some zones that have a lot of sorrow for women and all that. What I can see myself theorizing, or is that even the word, right? Haciendo teorías.
So. It works for me. Theorizing, yeah.
Make it a word.
Yeah,
make it a word.
That the thing for me that works most, or is more logic, is that maybe this was something that was way before the Aztecs. Like it wasn't something human originally, that is some kind of entity or force that was way before that, and that I don't know, you can call it a cryptid, something, a spirit, a force of nature, a demigod, whatever you want to call it. But I think it's more, it will be more, it will make more sense that it's something else than human, because especially considering Ray's story about the weird thing that came out of the water and emitted this light is what it makes me feel that is possibly something not human, that we can relate to that human story about the mother with her children and all that. And have you seen how a lot of people that live near forests sometimes hear like deer or elk or foxes even, that make some really weird screams that sound like humans in suffering, but they are really like animals? Maybe this could also apply to that this is some weird entity that that sometimes emits a sound that you can relate to a human. At least this is more logic to me than the ghost of a bride that it goes on from down in Mexico City's dressed as a bride in white and llorando ay mis hijos. That's my input into the theme.
I mean, you touch on something that's very, very important, and the water aspect of it. That it always seems like these sightings occur near water. Now, if you put it in that perspective, in that context, back in the day, back a very long time ago, mirrors were something of a luxury. Not everybody owned a mirror. Only if you're a high class, only if you could afford something like that. Because to make a mirror was very, very a process that was very not only complex but expensive. The only way that you could see yourself would be if you went to a body of water, the reflection of yourself in the water. Now, you touch on something that's very important right there, and that's, this is older than the legend itself, and it is quite a possibility, because back before we even knew of the idea that they could be mirrors, when primitive people, indigenous people, would go to bodies of water, they could see themselves reflected in the water. You know how much power that is, or how much it would affect someone that had never been able to see themselves, but everybody had seen them, to look into the reflection pool and see what they really look like. It was like magic to them. It was like, an experience that could not be shared on like just a regular level. So in essence, perhaps you aren't on the correct track right there, Javi. I think there's substance to that as well, because what if water, any body of water has been around longer than Earth has been around, because that's where we started from, that's where we came from. And in returning to that and looking upon ourselves in the reflection, we're kind of giving that power and taking from it as well. So whatever exists in the water, whatever exists in that area, could very well come over the person that was having the experience. You know what I mean? I don't know if I'm getting kind of jumbled up there, but
I got it.
You understand what I mean? Yeah. So there's that as well, Javi. So that's a really good point, man. I really, really, really like that. And there was a lot of questions in the chat asking where people could get the Ñañaras book. The Ñañaras book is seeming kind of
yeah, the Ñañaras book is out of print, but we are thinking about launching a Indiegogo campaign later on. So we will keep updating everybody on that on our Twitter and YouTube. So
and definitely reach out to the festival, reach out to me when you have that going, and I'm happy to help you publicize that and help get it funded. Yeah, this has been awesome. We have since we have a pre-recorded panel starting right at 2, but I want to give you all the chance. We have about 8 minutes left, so maybe take about 5 minutes to just your final thoughts, if you want to share your social media, but what would you like to leave us with? Let's start with Oliver.
Final words. Well, thank you for having us here, and we wish there wasn't a pandemic so we could have been there in person. And
no kidding.
and read more 6x6 comics. We have a lot of stuff planning for this year and next year. So yeah, we stay tuned
Fantastic.
For that. Yes.
Thank you, Javier. You're muted.
Just the same. Thank you so much for having us. And we have a YouTube channel, and we are trying real hard to balance the comic aspect of our work with the interesting thing that we came across sometimes. And this kind of discussion of cryptids and monsters is getting is real. Every day we are talking more and more about this, and I think this is only gonna get worse because the Ray book is coming up. So there's invitation to join us on the 656 Comics YouTube channel.
Awesome, and feel free anytime you post. If you tag us, then we will be connected, and we're happy to retweet and repost and help get the word out there. Thank you for being here, Ray.
Muchas gracias. Ray. Is Ray frozen?
Ray froze.
This is also something that really happens a lot, in our streams.
He's back. He's back.
One. I'm sorry. There I am. I'm sorry about that. I'm having some issues with my Wi-Fi. Obviously, it was working well until right now. I'm sorry, Javi. I didn't catch the last part you were saying.
No, nothing. That we have our YouTube channel and we are talking about cryptids more and more every day.
I know.
Because of your
that
book.
Way. The books. I mean, really quickly. I mean, just so everybody knows, we try to share our experiences on the border, everything that we've experienced and lived through, and in some cases, as Oliver will attest to, survived through, is what's reflected in the books that we produce. We try to inform people about the life on the border because it's unlike any other place in the U.S. or in Mexico. It's very, very strange, but very, very exciting at the same time. So we use the passion that we have for comics in order to drive that message across. The book that we just got funded, Undead Border, we use the zombie motif in order to put in the forefront the issues that people have with the border wall, with the us versus them mentality of the U.S. and Mexico, and how we're all just one big city, one big community that has to learn how to live with each other. We touch on a lot of other subjects as well. The Cryptoids, for example, we're using a lot of urban legends, a lot of urban myths that happen exclusively in this area of the country in order to get our message across about how we see each other in this area of the country, in El Paso and Juarez in the Southwest and in northern Mexico. I guess you would call it northern Mexico, right? Juarez.
Yeah.
And
El
that's
Norte.
El Norte. We use our experiences to get that across. So we're not trying to hit you over the head with any sort of agenda that we may have. We're just trying to use good old-fashioned comic book and storytelling in order to entertain you and also to hopefully teach you a little bit of what we've experienced.
Don't forget to plug the Indiegogo, Ray.
Yes, of course. And currently, if you want to put that up on the screen, you're more than welcome to.
Hell yeah.
We're in the pre-campaign mode for the Cryptoids, which is the Secret War of Monsters is about to begin. We have La Llorona as a hero, as I was stating. We have other cryptids such as El Ñango, which is an iteration of the Slender Man, Black-Eyed Kids, the Rake, Bigfoot, a bunch of different ones, the Man Dog, the Goat Man, Spring Heel Jack. All these characters are coming out. And if we could really quickly, Oli, if you want to run the trailer, this is the teaser trailer for the.
I don't think we have time. I'm so sorry.
Okay, no problem. You can go to the Indiegogo and check it out right now.
And Jennifer put that in the YouTube chat, so it's in there, and then we will also put it in the notes once the recording is done. But thank you so much. I'm glad that there's a campaign happening, and we will certainly support that and share that. So thank you again, Ray, Javier, Oliver, for being here for 656 Comics. So we look forward to lots more from you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Doctor. We do appreciate it. Thank you for everybody in the chat as well. We'll be seeing you very, very soon. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. So as you all are offboarding, I want to let folks know about the next few panels. We have our, at 2 o'clock, the Lcaf 2021 virtual gallery walk. That's myself and Professora Laura Manso. We take folks through the gallery, and we have almost 60 pieces, almost 60 works in this virtual art gallery. It's very, very cool. And that will be open through April 11th. And then at 3 o'clock, we have comics and pandemic futures with Justin Ruth, Dr. Fernanda Diaz Basteris, Javier Hernandez, Carlos Loso Perez, talking about creating during pandemic times. And then at 4, storytelling across mediums with Professor Latinx, Frederick Luis Aldama, Jaime Crespo, Carlo Flores, Candy Briones, and Alex Schumacher. So we are now signing off the live stream, and I want to remind you, as always,